send it to you, and then you can always kick it back to me if it's not in the right spot.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hornbacher,
I'll do that.
That's perfect.
the director.
No worries.
So
I'm
many
like, what? You
people-
can't.
Those reports every once in a while I go back and go, I miss that stuff. Let me read it.
Yeah. It's mind blowing.
And it is.
And I have to be careful when I cut and paste because I also know it shifts the formulas. Oh darn! I did that.
Yes, so many.
Well, I'm happy to support that position as a suggestion.
I don't think we're gonna,
Our voting person, but
yeah, no, we're not, I don't think we're gonna make any ruling on it.
It's just in general business, right? Is that what you're talking? Oh, okay.
No, we're,
PRPA? Oh,
we
Yeah,
don't,
the
we
PRPA
don't have
thing.
any authority at all
Yeah.
to, even suggest an amendment.
you can only well, no, we can't
Yeah,
suggest.
We can
We
suggest
can
an amendment,
suggest, but we
but there are
can't.
plenty of
make the
people that
amendment.
suggest amendment. The question, what I see is, our job here is to make it clear what it is, what they think it's doing, and what their motivations are.
Okay.
Because it's just, you know, it does support being authorized. Have you read the resolution?
Yes.
So, I don't know, whether support means authorized, I don't even know if a resolution has that strength.
In my opinion, it doesn't.
Well, that was, when I first read it, I said, oh, yeah, they're covering their asses. The best answer is, no, we're covering their asses. And it doesn't change anything. Just allows us to start bringing you forward sooner.
Yeah, I wasn't so much concerned with the resolution. I was more concerned with
It's okay, it's
the
okay.
actual implementation of the gas facility, the methane.
Natural gas. Natural gas at a certain priorities. And all of the turbines that you can buy off the shelf are optimized in terms of their lighting and their temperatures.
But in coal, it's not what we're going.
But it's
Not what we're going.
yeah. But they have different properties when you burn them. Okay, so off-the-shelf turbines are optimized for natural gas. It's fairly easy to optimize it for biomethanol, which is different abilities and different. Yeah. Green hydrogen is much harder. And there's no practical sources right now. So, I mean, it's science to actually produce it, but then it leaks away if you do everything to try to keep it in. And burns at a different temperature in a turbine.
Good evening, everyone. It looks like we have a full house tonight. I would like to call the October 24th, 2023 Longmont City Council regular session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel at longmontpublicmedia.org/watch or on Comcast channels 8 or 880. Can we have a roll call, please, Dawn?
Mayor Peck,
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo Faring. Here. Councilmember Martin. Here. Councilmember McCoy. Present. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Here. Councilmember Waters. Councilmember Yarbrough. Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Anyone wishing to speak? I'm sorry, but I got the wrong. Hang on. Give me just a second. Anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard? I'm sorry. I read what was on this agenda, now it's in my head, and it's not the right stuff I should be saying. So anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be needs to be a resident of the city or an employee of the city. Everyone else can speak at the final call public invited to be heard. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and one person may not give or assign their time to others. Persons wishing to speak on a specific item, second reading, or public hearing item are asked to add their name to the speaker list for that specific item prior to the start of the meeting. Anyone who would like to speak at first call public invited to be heard needs to sign the list that was outside. So you have 3 minutes, and we need to have your name and address. Now we have approval of the minutes. Can you turn on your microphone so people can hear you?
Mayor, I move that we move the minutes as presented from October 10th, 2023.
Second.
Right. Thank you. Councilor McCoy moved the minutes, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Do we have any agenda revisions
I do not, Mayor.
or submission? Do we have any counselors that want to direct the city manager to add items to future agendas? Seeing no one in the list, I will go to the city manager's report.
Yes, Mayor, Council, I do have a quick report on some of our ARPA projects. Sandy's going to bring that up. So as you may recall, when we when we received the ARPA funding, Council gave staff the ability to, as we were moving through the process, to restructure the dollars based on how they're being spent, what's available, and current needs that qualify for our ARPA funding. One of the things that has come into play is to date we have about $580,000 in interest that we've made on the ARPA funding. And that's a pretty critical point because under the ARPA rules, you don't have the same spending restrictions that you do related to the core ARPA funds. In addition, we have some projects that weren't moving through the process. And so if you look at the screen on the right side, you can see where we allocated the $580,000 in interest. We slid over $169,000 that we had for bridge housing that we weren't able to utilize. And then we also had some general fund. We had a duplicate funding for the ECC work that we were doing. So we had $150,000 in the general fund and $250,000 in ARPA funding. That was because we weren't sure about the eligibility of the ECC. They did work that through the eligibility process. And so as you see that sliding over, it gives us $899,000 available that really falls under the same component the same requirements that interest does. There were a few things that we also needed to fund. So when you look at the middle column, we did pull 63,300 out of ARPA funds to utilize on the LHA accessibility projects budget. So as you will recall, the Long Mountain Housing Authority is under a voluntary compliance agreement with HUD prior to the city taking over. And this is the last bit of accessibility work that we needed to do. So wanted to see if council is okay with us shifting the 63,000 to finish that accessibility work. So that's question one. At the same time, there were a few things that developed over the last month or so that needed our immediate attention. One of the things that came out is come to our attention that Hope is needing $200,000 to finish the remainder of the year out. If they don't get that funding, then having a facility for our unhoused over the next couple of months is going to be challenging for them, if not impossible, based on where they sit on funding. Christina's working with them right now. We'd have to bring a contract back to council, a contract amendment on that one. So when we looked at the 899,000 that we had, one of the recommendations is to pull 200,000 over so that we could fund Hope. As you all know, we're under construction in Zinnia, and as part of the Zinnia project, there is a deposit requirement. And a number of folks were looking at funds, and as you know, Zinnia is a permanent supportive housing project, so coming up with deposits for individuals is difficult. So we looked at potentially allocating $50,000 for the Zinnia deposit, and then associated with the re-syndication of Village Place, we're having some issues with the gazebo there, and we need to remove that. And so we looked at $6,400 to remove the gazebo. And then we're holding, recommending to council to hold $117,000 that's unallocated for either the LTE work that we're doing to bridge the digital divide for individuals that don't have access to internet, or the early childhood center that we're proposing with the Ascent at Hover Crossing. In this, we're recommending also $525,000 that will go to the Hover Housing Project, which is family housing. We want to include an early childhood center, as you all know from previous conversations, because it's not in a qualified census tract. You couldn't include that in basis on that project. Therefore, we have been out looking for funds. We have made a request to several foundations, the Worthy Cause program, and we're hearing that we have the likelihood of really getting funds, but we know there's still going to be a gap in what we need to do in order to include early childhood education into that project. So we're also recommending that the $525 go into Hover Ascent project so that we can include an early childhood education facility in that project, as we discussed. So wanted to talk to you all about this, give you the ability to ask questions. We will obviously have to bring things back to formalize this process, but we didn't want to go any further without getting council feedback. Happy to answer any questions.
Counselor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Harold, just for some clarification, on the unallocated, that get to 361, what's Peter represent?
Oh, Peter. Peter is our
Who is
ARPA,
Peter?
Peter Gibbons is our ARPA guru. And so what he's done is really scrubbed not only this, but what else we have in there. And so what we need is on the unallocated, you can have administrative expenses, and we know that when we go to the end of ARPA, there's going to be requirements to close out the programs, and I believe that $32,000 is really for the accounting work that we have to do after the expenditure.
Costs.
It's administrative costs.
You just noted who's the administrator in this case?
Correct.
Covered some of his time.
Yep.
On the, well, second, just from my understanding, I'm probably the only one who doesn't know what ECC under general fund stands for?
Enabling caring communities, and that's when we're looking at we're working on how we create a system that can really take the
I
human
remember the
intelligence
project,
component.
now that
and-
now that you
yeah.
mentioned it. Are we abandoning that? I mean, that was kind of a seminal effort.
It is, and we're still working on that project. On our side, there's some things that are happening that are changing the nature of this. And so one of the significant changes is the work that we're doing with Salesforce and our customer portal for our utility departments, which actually gives you a really good data set. So right now, we're evaluating what comes first and what we need to do in order to move it forward. So we know we need funding for it, but we're just evaluating the technology that we're utilizing now. But it is ARPA. Yeah.
Well, that's, whatever you do with Salesforce is going to go way north of $150,000, I would assume.
So we're evaluating it right now to make the decision on how we move forward, but we're holding it for that project.
All right, last comment would be, the 525 is net of the 899, right?
Correct.
In these expenses. And so the good news here is, you've got some money potentially to invest in the expanded vision or the initial vision for the Ascent project, right? That, at least temporarily, I don't know if that's going to stick, but that's the reference here, the Ascent project.
Correct.
Then my suggestion is you make reference here to childcare and early learning. If, the way you've got it labeled now, for early childhood education potentially excludes 0 to 3-year-olds, and I think that would be a huge mistake, and I think we ought to be really clear going forward that you're talking about every pre-K 0 to 4 or 0 to 5.
Correct.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So my question is, considering the HOPE portion of the allocation that's being requested, what are the change conditions to bring this $200,000 gap that you mentioned?
So there's a few, I think. One of the challenges that they've been having is staffing and the cost of staffing. You know, we talked about that in the budget. Another issue is just the cost of what they need to support the people when they're housing them in terms of clothing, socks, materials that they have to use. Christina actually has all of that detail. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today, but if council says yes, we will have to bring all of that back with an amended contract.
Okay, so it would have to come back
Yeah.
to us again.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Building on the Mayor Pro Tem's question, the consequence of HOPE being unable to fulfill its purpose for how many months, the remainder of the year? Is that what we're talking about? It would mean that some of our street outreach capabilities, like asking street sleeping people to relocate, could not be carried out. Is that correct?
Well, you have that, but you also were going into the winter months, and so we have that issue too. And in talking to our staff that deals with that, that was something that they were really concerned about, is not having a venue for those individuals.
Fair enough. Thank you.
And I have a question as well. The gazebo that we're going to take down, that's at the corner of, not the corner, at 6th and Main?
Yeah, it's in the plaza, and what we're having right now is we're having some significant public safety issues in that area. And so it's been recommended from a SEPTED standpoint. We'll leave the plants and other things there, but to remove the gazebo and then really go at that area with the SEPTED design so that we can minimize the issues that we're having between the, you know, adjacent to the Village Place apartments, but also adjacent to the Spoke.
Okay. Thank you. So, Councilor Hidalgo Ferring.
So, actually, I do have a question on the 173.6 thousand on the unallocated. So you had mentioned about the LTE and ECE. So when would we decide where that money would go to?
We would bring that back to you in a similar fashion for direction on this to look at. what we're doing is, the work that we're doing in conjunction with the St. Vrain Valley School District is building an LTE network where individuals who don't have access to internet can get a hotspot and work off of it. We're in the process of building a number of locations out. That's also in conjunction with our camera project because we're using the same bandwidth. What we don't know right now is what we're going to be able to build, and there's still some questions on eligibility and other issues that we need to figure out in terms of connecting to students. And so we didn't, ideally it was originally there to have all of that go to, Ascent at Hover for the early childhood facility, but we think there still may potentially be a gap in the LTE in bridging the digital divide, so we wanted to wait a little bit on that.
Okay. And are there any federal grant opportunities for technology? I feel like there might be, when I meet with the Congressman, Neguse, I've heard of more opportunities as far as digital and connectivity as opposed to what I'm hearing for early childhood.
There are some, we've applied for some grants and didn't get them based on the nature of where we are set up. Actually, the primary funding for the LTE network actually came from some of those funding sources.
Okay.
And that's what the school district was able to receive.
Okay, and then we would have more detail when it comes back to us as to.
Yeah, for the individual pieces.
For the individual, getting more into the weeds, because I think about back, with COVID, when the school district did have hotspots, it required the kids to actually go into the parking lots of the schools and do work.
No, this is actually working from your house, and you get a device where you can work from your house. You don't have to go
Perfect.
anywhere. And as we continue lighting up parks as part of the initiative that we have with the camera program, we're just expanding access for those individuals so they can go to a park
Perfect.
and
Okay.
they'll have access in any part of that system.
Okay, thank you.
Part of the reason why we needed to bring this and get direction from council is because we're getting ready to present to CHAFA on the Ascent at Hover project, and being able to come in and say, yes, we can, earmark some of these funds for early childhood actually gives us a stronger project coming into that presentation. So that's why we wanted to bring this.
Great. So you would need direction just to tell you to continue on this path with using the ARPA funds and
then
redirecting.
we'll bring back the required documents on each individual category as needed.
So I don't think that this needs a motion, but can we do Eugene, do we need a motion here or just a thumbs up?
Just a direction.
Yeah. So all those in favor, just raise your hand if you want them to continue. Fantastic. Thank you, Harold.
Right, thank you.
We're now at our special reports and presentation. We have an electric utility update, including Platte River Powers Authority's Integrated Resource Plan process. So I would like who is going to start here? Is it going to be Jason Frisbee or Daryl? There he is.
Daryl, which one is it? Is that down here?
Good evening, Mayor Peck. Good evening, Mayor Peck, members of council. My name's Daryl Hahn. I'm the Electric Utility Director, also known as LPC. I'm here tonight to give you a brief overview of some of the exciting things that we've been doing in LPC related to our 100% renewable goal, and then I'll be introducing the team from Platte River to talk tonight about their integrated resource plan, which is their very detailed plan in terms of how they're going to meet that goal. So as most of you know, we have a pretty close relationship with the Platte River Power Authority. As our electric utility, we've been community driven for the last 111 years. I mentioned the peak load here of 190 megawatts. For most people, that doesn't mean a lot. Is that a lot or a little? But I mention it here just to kind of keep that number in mind as you're going through the Platte River presentation for a sense of scale. So when they talk about 200 megawatts, 300 megawatts, 50 megawatts, you'll at least have a sense of what that means in terms of, okay, this is a Longmont's load, peak load on a very hot day, and then this is what they're talking about. Obviously, the city council is the quote-unquote board of directors for the city here, and you set the direction. Similarly, at Platte River Power Authority, they have a board of directors, and 2 of the 8 board members are actually from the city of Longmont. Mayor Peck is one of the board members, and Dave Hornbacher, who's the assistant city manager, is the other board member representing Longmont. About 50 years ago, the city of Longmont and 3 of the other local communities formed the Platte River Power Authority to be our nonprofit generation and transmission utility. So in other words, now the city of Longmont can focus on more of the customer-facing elements of the distribution system here within the city, and then outside of the city, all of the transmission system and the generation to get the energy to us is placed on Platte River. So we work very closely with them, as do the other cities, to make all of this work in concert. As you know, the City Council issued a directive. It's for us to meet a 100% renewable energy goal by 2030, and Platte River has the same goal. We've been working together, obviously, to keep the lights on and transition us to a renewable energy supply. Within LPC, we're doing things right now in pursuit of that 100% renewable goal. We've embarked on what we call a smart grid roadmap, and we're actively engaged with the consultant on developing that roadmap. And that roadmap is going to tell us, at least provide some guidance in terms of what are some of the things that we need to be doing on our distribution system to get us to that 100% goal, and how does that feed into our capital improvement program. We have, as you know, we've been deploying the AMI system, which is really a key part of our ability to monitor the grid and monitor the distribution system so that we know how and where we can incorporate renewable energy even further on the distribution system. We're also looking at some of our, I call them dumb devices to make them smart. These are the legacy distribution systems and equipment like switchgear and that sort of thing. Right now, if something happens, somebody has to drive out to them and take some manual action. But if we make them quote unquote smart, we can control them remotely, possibly through SCADA, and restore customers much more quickly. Obviously, one of the big challenges that we have facing us is increased load from electrification, which is the conversion of gas appliances to electric appliances. So not only are we pursuing a 100% renewable goal by 2030, but we're also going to be increasing the load that we actually have to feed from that renewable source. So it's kind of a double whammy from that perspective. And the Smart Grid Roadmap, too, is going to help us develop our CIP for the next 5 to 30 years. This isn't just something that we do and then in 2030 we walk away and say it's done. On top of all of these cool, smart things that we're going to be doing, we also have to look at our core services. This is, the poles and underground cables and replacing the small transformers. They have a limited life, and when they're done, they have to be replaced. So this is also taking up a lot of our time just to make sure that we maintain reliability. One of the pieces that I often mention when I'm up here in front of you is the substation transformers. Those are very large and very expensive, and that's not necessarily directly related to meeting our renewable goal, other than it has to have the appropriate capacity. But again, 50, 60 years later, they do eventually start to die, and we need to replace them. So these are the types of things that we're doing in parallel with some of the smart grid work. Just want to touch briefly on something that we affectionately call DERs, or DERs, Distributed Energy Resources. We have a lot of demonstration projects that we've completed or are currently in process, and you can read about them here. Energy efficiency, obviously, the less you need to use, the less that we need to procure. We had a smart thermostat demonstration, actually learned a lot from that, some of the pros and cons from that type of resource. We have some EV charging rebates and e-bike rebates that we implemented a couple of years ago and are ongoing. Platte River also has a similar program, as do many other agencies. And we're also working on developing and enforcing building performance standards, starting with the larger buildings and slowly working our way down. So there's kind of some of the things that are ongoing right now or have been accomplished. A few other really fun projects. We've got a solar interconnection review and planning process. Okay, that's not really fun, but it's certainly necessary, and it's going to help us ensure that we can get the right amount of solar in the city in a way that isn't onerous. We're also working on a community solar program. This is something that I'm really excited about. You know, not everybody has a roof and not everybody can afford to put solar on that roof. So this will be an opportunity for members of the community to participate in some of the local solar without having to have a roof and having a solar system on their roof. And finally, another project that we're working on with Platte River and the other 3 owner communities is battery storage, some larger battery storage, potentially within our substations. And so the idea here is that we should be able to potentially peak shave, meaning we kind of reduce the peak load at the hottest days of the year, and we can discharge our battery instead. That this is really going to be an interesting exercise in helping us understand how batteries can be used in the real world. It's not just a white paper, it's not something that's been studied, but this will be our opportunity to actually get in there and use the battery and see what it can do. Obviously, these are just some of the things that the City of Longmont is working on. A big part, a very large part of our ability to meet the 100% renewable goal is working with Platte River and procuring those energy, the 100% renewable energy. And so I'd like to introduce Jason Frisbee, who is the CEO of Platte River Power Authority.
Thank you, Darryl.
Yeah, you bet.
Just to the right here.
To the right, yeah.
So it's been about a year since we've been down here. I'll move this up and then Roger will move it back down. So we kind of split up this presentation. I'm going to talk on the front end, kind of higher level, and then Raj is going to take a deeper dive into a lot of the work that's being done on the IRP. And I'll also touch a lot about what Darryl talked about too, on how we're going to integrate some of these systems as we move forward, but not just the City of Longmont, with all Platte River's owner communities. Darryl talked about you all being 190 megawatt peak. So if you look at Platte River together, you're about 27% of Platte River. If you asked how much energy does the city use on an annual basis, it's about 800,000 megawatt hours. Those numbers become a little important as you start looking at the scale and magnitude of the amount of energy that we're starting to bring on the system from a non-carbon perspective. Two things I'd point out on this slide: the 23 projected energy deliveries total to all 4 communities is about 3.3 million. How much energy we plan delivering to the entire system is a little over 5 million. So you might say, what's the difference? Those are sales that are made into the market at presumably a profit, a net profit, and that helps subsidize your rate. If you were to ask me, how much impact does it have? It varies from year to year depending on market conditions. But the last time we ran through it, about 3 or 4 months ago, it's about a 10% rate subsidy from our wholesale rate to you all that happens as a result of those transactions. So Darryl also talked about in 2018, the Platte River Board passed the resource diversification policy in December. And what that policy said was it instructed me as the CEO to proactively work towards zero carbon by 2030. Without sacrificing the 3 tenets of the organization: reliability, affordability, and environmental responsibility. As we work through that resolution that was ultimately passed, we had a lot of discussion about things that were within our control and things that were not within our control. And so on the right, you can kind of see a checklist of some of those items. You can see that one of the things is that we need to be in an organized market. That's a whole nother presentation on how we transact across a broader footprint with others that have renewables. And you can see a lot of these things that are in progress, either Darryl has touched on or Raj is going to touch on in his part of the presentation, because that's really the integration of Platte River and the owner communities in creating a virtual power plant, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then you can see awaiting technology. While I would say to you that 2 and 4 hour storage is ready for prime time, what we really need to keep the system reliable is long duration storage. There are a couple of big players out there in the industry. Some are working on 8 to 10 hour storage. There's others that are working on 100-hour storage. And so that will be game changing. It's in its infancy. We've been following it. We have made numerous trips. In fact, Darryl was with us on a recent trip. We took all the utility directors out to San Francisco, went to Form Energy, looked at what they had going on. We've been out there about 3 times now. They were actually at our campus today, looking at the availability of land and water and some things that they would need to put that in there. But as we sit here right now, we can't just go out, issue a purchase order, and buy long-duration storage. But it is promising, so we're very optimistic that it's going to be there in the next couple of years. To scale, there's manufacturing facilities being built. Then the question will be how long would it take us to get it on our system? If you ask me what we've done since the board passed this policy, we've added 225 megawatts of roundhouse wind. 225 megawatts, what's that mean on an annual energy delivery basis? It's about enough energy to serve your whole town for a year. Now, does your town consume it the way that the wind farm produces it? No, but on order of scale, it produces, depending upon, last year was a very windy year. The project produced about 880,000 megawatt hours. This year it's probably more around 800,000, but that was a significant project for us. It's also significant from the standpoint that it's directly connected to our substation at Dryden Energy Station, because these projects, a big part of the cost associated with them isn't just what you pay for the project, but it's the cost to get it onto your system using other people's transmission. In this case, we talked to the board about building our own transmission system so that we put up the capital costs up front, so it will be directly connected. So that's a strategic project for us. There's some other opportunity out there. We announced the decommissioning of all 3 of our coal assets. We, along with 4 other utilities, are joint owners of units 1 and 2 at the Craig Station. We get 77 megawatts times 2 off of each shaft over there, and then we own the Rawhide Energy Station. You all own the Rawhide Energy Station. That's a 280 megawatt facility. Unit 1 at the Craig Station scheduled to shut down at the end of 2025. Unit 2 scheduled to shut down in December of 2028. Some people ask me, why'd you pick September? 2 of the partners are short on capacity and energy, and they wanted to be able to have that facility available through the summer months. And so as we negotiated the closure date, because when you put these contracts together, nobody ever anticipates them shutting down. So it ended up being a negotiation of how we would shut it down. That's why it came to that date. And obviously, we'd have to have Rawhide shut down before 2030. We added another 22 megawatts. We have 30 megawatts of solar up at Rawhide. We put that in 2016. We added another 22. We put a 2 megawatt Tesla battery in there. Why 2 megawatts? It seemed like a reasonable amount for us to get familiar with. When we were going to charge it, when we were going to discharge it, how were we going to use it on the system? It's kind of a reoccurring theme with Platte River. We tend to kind of dollar cost average our way into things, get familiarity with them, let prices come down before we take off bigger chunks. We have a lot of things going on right now. We have additional solar and energy storage RFPs out on the system. The staff is reviewing them. What I can tell you is that we had hoped to have our 150 megawatt solar project in Weld County under construction right now. As you all, I'm sure, and Harold has talked about, with supply chain issues and inflation, that project got delayed. In fact, they wanted to renegotiate the project, which is an ongoing theme in the industry right now, because there are so many pressures on these manufacturers that they're not willing to honor their contracts, even at the signed contract price. Even though they have liquidated damages in them, they will pay off the liquidated damages, and then we're going through an RFP and starting over. Time isn't our friend, because we're trying to get this done by 2030. We renegotiated with them. That pushed this whole project out about another year, and it's going to start construction next year. We're the first utility in the state of Colorado to voluntarily say to the state that we will achieve 80% carbon reduction from 2005 levels by 2030. We thought, gee, this is consistent with what we're trying to do as a utility anyway. Why wouldn't we take the lead in the state of Colorado? And so the board unanimously chose to go that direction. And then we just announced, and we are operating in the Southwest Power Pool in the energy imbalance market portion. And we plan on very shortly in the next year or so moving into about a year and a half into the full RTO market. That's a whole other presentation to talk about an imbalance market and an RTO market. But suffice it to say that the energy imbalance market was an easy way to get in the market and get somewhat familiar with what was happening before we went into the full-blown market. There's a lot of back office infrastructure. We've invested over $10 million and added about 12 staff members just to be able to manage the transactions that are going to go on in the interaction with that market. Where we've typically been in a bilateral market, our job is to always serve owner community load first and then sell surplus energy with the neighbors that we're connected with It wouldn't be that hard for you to guess who they are. They're Tri-State, they're Excel, they're Black Hills, they're Colorado Springs. Everybody that's up and down the I-25 corridor, we make one-off arrangements with them for blocks of power, and we buy from them as well. This is different where it's all getting put into a basket, right? And a market operator is managing them for you. What does it look like visually between now and 30, this journey that we're going on? This just shows the non-carbon energy. And so the blue represents hydro. Unfortunately for us, we project losing hydro allocation as we continue to move forward. Everybody's familiar with the drought that's going on. We had a great water year this year. In fact, we got excess hydro energy that was surplus to them. We bought because we're entitled to that with our contracts. But as we go forward, we project that getting less, which Daryl alluded to this. I can't think of anything that's kind of gone our way financially or from a cost issue or supply chain issue or even our hydro resources as we're trying to embark upon this. A lot of the models that we had back in 2018 that projected what it would cost to do this have just been blown out of the window. Yet we're still forging ahead and trying to do it and maintain affordability of the system. You can see the large project that I described, if you look at from 2019 to 2021, when that wind came on the system. So the green represents wind and then the yellow represents solar. So you can see the smaller sliver of solar is what we have at RIDE right now. And you can see in 2024 and 25, the 150 coming on. Raj will go into more detail on the balance of that slide, specifically what we're planning adding and when we're planning on adding it between now and 2030. But I would draw your attention to, if you look at the 2030 and you look back over, it's over 3.5 million megawatt hours on an annual basis. And in 2030, we project about 3.5 million megawatts of consumption amongst all 4 cities. And so there's enough renewable energy up there to serve all of the needs of the owner communities. Is it going to get served all 8,760 hours a year by that? No, because that's not the way it's consumed. But yet we will be putting that much under the system, whether it's being delivered to you or it's being delivered to the market. It's still removing carbon from the atmosphere. Last slide, and I'll turn it over to Raj. So as we sit here this year from a budget perspective, we're at 33.3% non-carbon resources. That's a budgeted number. Wind and solar tend to deviate from that. Last year, if you were to look at the number, we had a very good wind year and an average solar year. This year, we're slightly behind on both wind and solar, but that was our projection when we put the budget together. If you look where we project to be in 2030, you see 88.4% non-carbon energy and 11.6% dispatchable capacity. I will be the first to tell you those numbers are wrong, but they're not that wrong. They're probably plus or minus 3, 4, 5%. Some of the variability is just the performance of the resources that are going to be on the system. And some of it, excuse me, depends a lot about what Raj is going to talk about and the work that his team is doing with Daryl and the other utility directors in the owner communities as we build out a virtual power plant and when we start taking and adding chunks of long duration storage. Because if you look at that pie and you say, well, gee, that's inconsistent with a target of zero carbon by 2030, as we sit here right now, that's our best projection. It will change as we move forward, and what will close that gap in the blue certainly are synthetic fuels and the proliferation of long duration storage and the success that we have, not just in Longmont, but in all 4 owner communities of, we talked about this last year when we were here, a virtual power plant, I would describe it this way, it's almost a shock absorber on the system. And so when we have excess renewables, we will have to work with you and your owner communities. We'll have to contemplate rate changes and providing incentives for people to say, hey, look, now's the time to charge your electric vehicle. We have a surplus of renewables on the system, more than we can deliver to your cities. Why not charge now? And then the converse would be true. When things are tight on the system, when we're not in surplus, is when we would ask people to conserve energy. So that's what we're focused on. Raj is going to go into more detail. The 88.4 obviously is more wind, it's more solar, it's hydro, and it's 4-hour storage. When Daryl was referring to putting solar or storage in the substations, we think, and we've done a lot of research, and we're not the only ones, a lot of utilities have come to this conclusion, the best place for the short 2 and 4 hour battery storage is very close to the end use, and the long duration where it tends to be more of, out like central station power that's going to fill in gaps of dark comms and things like Raj is going to talk about, that will more than likely be hosted up at the Rawhide site. With that, I'll turn it over to Raj Singham Sethi. He's our Chief Transition and Integration Officer. It's a brand new division we started a couple of years ago because we have a Chief Operating Officer that's responsible for all the assets that we have now and also responsible for the assets in the market once Raj's team brings them to commercial operation.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Oh, I was just trying to be tall. As Jason said, I'm going to pull it down, but I didn't.
Not going to happen for you, Raj.
Good evening, Mayor and other council members. Thank you. So the first, 2024 Integrated Resource Plan. So Integrated Resource Plan, in our world, we like acronyms. We call it IRP. So I'll be referring to IRP, which is an Integrated Resource Plan. IRP is like a blueprint that we create for the utilities to look at the customer demand. As new customers come in, the electric demand increases, and what distributed energy resources that would be coming into the system. The reason why knowing how much distributed energy resources come into the system is important, because you heard Daryl talking about electrification. He talked about residential solar. So all of these have variability in it. And the wholesale utility needs to make sure that we can plan for how much electrification is going to happen in the future. We need to plan how much solar is going to come so that we can serve in the event if there is no sun and if there is no energy available for them to serve. So this is a lot of coordination between the cities and Platte River Power Authority. And then the study itself is done for 10 to 20 years. The study period is 20 years. And in this process, we do every few years because it takes a lot of time to do this. We have a team of 4 members in Platte River who are focused on Integrated Resource Plan. And then this time we had engaged lots of consultants, which I'll talk briefly with some of the studies that were done to help us with this integrated resource planning. The idea is to assist with technological changes, look at consumer preferences and regulatory mandates, that all of these are inputs to our IRP process and recommend a plan. We also have an obligation from WAPA, which is Western Area Power Administration. Every 5 years, we have to submit an IRP plan. This is part of hydro allocation that Jason talked. WAPA expects the entities that get the hydro allocation to submit a plan, how they're going to be serving their load. So WAPA requires a plan that was submitted last time in 2020. So the IRP modeling itself, it has inputs. We use Plexos model as our tool to run this software, which takes about, on an average, 72 hours to run once we start a scenario. There are lots of inputs that go into this model. We have load forecast, we have DER potential that I talked about, also power price forecast. So the power prices, as we will be integrating into a market, we will be getting price signals. We want to identify the right locations to put our wind and solar, because you do not want to put locations where the prices are negative or low because of transmission constraints. So we have to analyze those locations by power price forecast. Then we also look at the resource costs. We have different resources that we'll be integrating. We have to look at what's the cost of energy storage, what's the cost of solar, wind, and I do have a slide to talk a little bit more about prices and resource costs. And then this time, the other inputs that we are seeing is extreme weather events. Extreme weather events are events where we see extremely high temperature, extremely cold, and how does renewable resources perform during those extreme weather events? That is an input to the model. And then we also look at renewable profiles. We have different solar shapes, we have different wind shapes. Again, when I talk about shapes, it is looking at every given hour how much wind is produced. Every given hour how much solar is produced. Each one of them have their shape based, if it's solar, it has got seasonality. If it's, because when it's sunny, you will get solar, and when it's windy, you'll get wind. We have to look at all those shapes. We take all those inputs and put it through a model, which goes through what's called a mixed integer programming. It's a linear optimization problem, and we solve for portfolios. And the recommended portfolio recommends how much is the right resource mix of renewable resources and new technologies. It considers all those inputs to serve. There is a load generation balancing constraint, making sure that we have enough generation available to serve our load. That's one of the input or the output of the model. We also look at the least cost. We want to make sure that we serve our customers at the least cost, affordable, to be serving them with the right resources. It's like the portfolio. It's no different than our assets that we have. We want to have a right mix of different asset classes to make up our portfolio. And then we look at the carbon reduction. We have carbon reduction, how much it will reduce the carbon reduction. Jason talked about the 80% carbon reduction, that we make sure that at the minimum, all our portfolios solve for that. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit more about reserve margins, which is also referred as planning reserve margins. I'll talk about that, which is one of the studies that we had done. We requested a Strape consulting company to help us with the study. And finally, we take the portfolio that gets developed, we push it into reliability testing. What reliability testing does, it looks for the portfolio's performance during DARCOM events. Again, a DARCOM, what it means is when it's dark, meaning there is no sun, and there is no solar energy, and what I mean by calm is it's not windy, and there is no wind, and there is no wind energy. And it is not something that has not happened in our portfolio. We have seen DARCOM events. We are seeing DARCOM events in other places as well. This is basically low supply for extended number of days. And that is what that scenario. And the extreme weather is high demand. When we have demand, which is very high, do we have enough supply to serve the load? That is another test we do. We also look at different wind and solar profiles. We do some sensitivity around how much wind and solar can the system take. If you have seen Jason's last slide, he talked about 88% of renewable energy. So with that much of intermittent energy resources in the system, the reliability of the system has to be tested, and that's the reliability testing we do. And this process is an iterative process. We change the inputs, and we keep testing different scenarios. We have millions of variables that we test and look for the best portfolio mix. We ran through 25 scenarios, which we will be talking about in our next meetings. But that's the idea is it's an iterative process, a complex model to recommend the best portfolio. In my input, I talked about prices, resource prices. So Inflation Reduction Act was welcomed. It came around 2022 Q2. If you see the line, it was passed in 2022, but the PPA prices have not gone down. Jason alluded to we have been renegotiating some of the PPA prices. This has been a challenge wherein the PPA prices have gone up. But the way I look at this is if IRA was not there, PPA prices would have been further higher. PPA prices are at least, I would say, marginally increased because of IRA pass. If not, we probably would have seen. But what's really causing all this? Obviously, inflation, supply chain issues, interest rates, higher interest rates, and there is a lot of upward pressure on the risk of EPC costs. And the risk that used to be taken by the developer is being pushed to the customer. Most of the risks are unknown to them, and that is what's causing these prices go up. Every developer, every wind developer, every solar developer, this is what we're seeing. So you can see the prices have almost, I would say, increased 2x from the time the resource diversification policy was passed. That's what we are dealing with. The prices have gone up. That is an input to the model. The other thing is extreme weather events. I talked about DARCOM. So this is a scenario we simulated for 2031. In 2031, we would have retired all our coal assets. What you would see is the black line is the load or the demand we have to serve, and the green is the renewable generation. So from February 11th to February 17th, that 1 week, what you could have seen is renewable generation just dropping after second day. Even after the first day, you started seeing that oscillation, but from 13th to 16th, the wind basically, or the renewable generation basically drops for 4 days, and it's less than 100 megawatts. And the gap that you see is the problem that we are trying to solve. This is a problem that we have to solve to serve our electric demand. The other problem that we have is you also heard electrification is becoming important. We will have electric vehicles. So as you are adding electrification, you also have to make sure we are able to serve electric in the situations like these. So it's not a battery problem. People do say when they see gaps, it's always considered, oh, you can just time shift it and battery solves it. I agree that battery is an important in our resource mix, which we are considering. Battery is in our portfolio, but what is the size of the battery? Could we have 10 gigawatts of battery, which would have costed us billions of dollars, and just do that 5 days? Or is there another optimal resource mix that can help during these transition periods? And
Might point out to them that that was the actual load that we saw during Winter Storm Uri, and then we projected it forward based on load growth. So that was the exact pattern that we had to serve during Uri in 2021 on our system. So that's just not a hypothetical thing.
It's a good point. The storm Uri in 2021 that is the load that we had to serve with that. We had in 2021 we had coal plants, we had thermal resources to serve our load. In 2031, we won't have thermal resources to serve. And the problem would have been solved if we had other type of resources with renewable, with storage. And another solution would be the long duration storage. We talk about long duration storage is something that can store and discharge over 100 hours, because that could have been a solution that we could have put in and discharge over multiple days. So that's kind of the scenarios and testing we do with our reliability under the integrated resource plan. And another thing that we talk about is the planning reserve margin requirement. So the planning reserve margin requirement, I'll start with the orange line. I think it's yellow, but yeah, the yellow line is the load that we would see. It's an electric demand that's by month. And if you see the peak, which is at the top, that's the peak load. When we talked about 190 megawatts that Longmont requires, the peak load, that's how much the maximum that you would need. And the planning reserve margin is a requirement by the regional entity, which is Western Electric Coordinating Council, which is one of the regional entities, one of the 6 regional entities in the country, which was formed under the NERC, which is North American Electric Reliability Corporation. And it's also FERC regulated, which is Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. These have the role of Western Electric Coordinating Council is to make sure the reliability standards are met by the utilities that are in the Western interconnection. The Western interconnection makes sure that it is makes sure that we have enough supply, there's enough coordination between the utilities. The recommended planning reserve margin by WEC. WEC is a governmental entity. They recommended about 22 to 25% of planning reserve margin requirements. And then we engaged a Strap, a consulting firm, and that firm recommended that we carry at least 20 to 25% of planning reserve margin requirement. But the key is, before integrating renewable resources, historically, we had to only carry 15% planning reserve margin requirements. So from 15, we are going to 20%. And the reason for that is we are adding intermittent renewable resources in the system. It's the renewable resources that requires us to make sure that we have dispatchability in the system, we have excess capacity. The question can be asked is, why can't wind and solar be helping in that reliability margin or reserve margins? The challenge with solar and wind, they don't get the same capacity accreditation that other dispatchable capacity gets. And the reason for that is, as you are adding more solar, your peak load is shifting. The contribution of your solar and wind during the peak load is not there because you've added during your sun or solar energy is available in the middle of the day and your peak load requirement has dropped, but you've shifted the peak load to the next hour. When it's the next hour, you don't have as much solar. So that is what happens. And the term that we use is called ELCC, effective load carrying capability. And that puts a lot of pressure. As we add more solar, we get less capacity accreditation. That was another study we had engaged Strape to tell us how much capacity value can we get from wind and solar as well. So the next study was around the DER potential study. Again, Darren talked about all the DER work that is being done in the community. And this is really great because information from Darrell's team will come into us in terms of how do we serve the load and how do we manage our electric needs will be a big input that we need for our integrated resource plan. And some of the studies we have done is electric vehicles, transportation. So we had done this similar study in 2021, and you can see there is 2021 and 2023. You can see a significant increase or a delta between 21 and 23. So electric vehicle adoption is going to be higher in the new study, and we have modeled the increased energy demand from electric vehicles in our integrated resource plan. So you can see I'll just talk about 2030, we would have about 40 megawatts of peak demand, but the energy is also increasing. And if you go by 2040, it almost doubles. So those are the challenges that we are trying to deal to serve our load. The next one is solar potential. We looked at, we had first done the study in 2021, which is the blue line, and we started noticing orange is what we are seeing today. That's the solar that we have already seen in the system. What you would see is we are already missing our forecast of how much solar is going to integrate into the system. So for this next IRP 24, we are actually using the dotted line, which shows more solar penetrating into the systems, and we have to manage the reliability because solar definitely will contribute to the overall resource mix. It would reduce how much the utility has to procure. At the same time, as more solar penetrates, we have to make sure we have situations where we don't have supply, and how do we manage that? It creates a reliability challenge with integrating solar. And then storage, we talked about storage as well. Definitely storage is a great flexible resource. It would be great if solar and storage are together because you can actually store your solar energy into your storage and discharge it when you need it. But it's obviously specific to customer site. You can't really use it for everyone. With the distributed storage that we have been talking about, this would be for broader electric system, and it will be also part of the virtual power plant so that everyone can benefit rather than having individual electric storage. So it would be almost like a community storage that everyone can benefit from that. So then comes the new dispatchable capacity. The way we define dispatchable capacity, it's the flexibility. The flexibility is what we need. We have adding lot of intermittent resources in our system, 88%. We need flexibility, which comes from virtual power plant. All the data that is needed from a virtual power plant needs to come to us so that we can manage our system. We can control, we can request that control your devices so that we can reduce your electric demand or increase the electric demand. That would be a great balance or shock absorber, as Jason refers, for managing the system. That's step one. Step 2 is long duration energy storage, a storage that can last over 100 hours. Plan is when we have excess wind or excess solar, rather than dumping that excess energy in the energy market at low prices, we would like to charge our batteries, the long duration storage batteries, and discharge it over a week. And that would be another way to manage our flexibility needs. The third piece, which has been talked about, is the thermal capacity, the aeroderivative. And there have been multi-track process. We have had internal teams from resource planning, strategy, engineering, operations, transmission, environmental group. We have many consultants who have helped us with some of the studies. We have engaged with different vendors. You can see the list, I'm not going to read. And we have made site visits to different resources that are using these technologies. We engaged Black & Veatch to help us with screening, looking at the operational characteristics, because we have unique requirements. One of the requests to Black & Veatch was to, if we are integrating 88% of our system load with renewable energy, what kind of resource would be a good fit? Those were the questions. It was driven by renewable integration. It is driven by emissions. It was driven by fuel versatility. We looked at all these characteristics to make sure it is the right fit. It's the right fit in our portfolio. We also looked at market performance. Jason talked about market performance. One of the key things in market is you have to be supply adequate or resource adequate. You also have to provide ancillary services. Ancillary services, to be very clear, there are different types of ancillary services. Regulation, which is every 4 seconds to make sure the generation and load is balanced. Then we have spinning reserves. So if there is a sudden increase in demand or a loss of an electric unit, the spinning resource come online. And there is also what's non-spin, which is basically saying if there is a sudden outage, then we need more resources to bring in. These different ancillary services are also needed when you have wind and solar in your system. It creates a lot of variability in the system, and these resources can provide those ancillary services. In the past, our focus was more around serving the load, but now consumers are also producers. We are adding intermittent resources to the system. We need all the flexibility that we need so that we can balance the load and the generation. So this is that resource that can provide all those things with other two resources, long duration storage and virtual power plant. And then I'm going to wrap it up with the long duration storage, the 3 pillars I would call for the dispatchable capacity. One is the long duration storage. And this is emerging technology. We have seen announcement from Xcel Energy at Minnesota and Colorado, and there's an announcement at Georgia Power, and there is an announcement for Great River Energy. We have been working with them for almost a couple of years now. We have made the site visits. Like Jason said, they are here, they're looking at the site. Our plan is to integrate long duration storage. We bring it into the system and see how it performs. We are in discussions with 2 potential suppliers. One is about 8 to 10 hours duration storage. Another one is about 100 hours. And the virtual power plant, a lot of work is being done. DR teams have been established at all the 4 communities that we serve, and we have regular meetings that we are working with them to understand what type of distributed energy resource devices can come in. And the ultimate idea is to be able to request them to control and manage and contribute as a good grid citizen and manage the integration of renewable resources. And finally, the thermal capacity. This will actually allow deeper level of renewable penetration because it provides ancillary services. It will provide a lot of stability and integrity to the grid, and it will help us through DARCOMs, extreme weather events. And we are also working with the consultants and everyone. Whenever hydrogen is going to be ready, green hydrogen, and maybe we will even have pilots to test that. We will make sure that the asset, the engine is hydrogen capable. Maybe it starts with blending, and then we can start moving into one fuel source. But the idea is to make sure the reliability of the system is maintained, and we continue to this deep renewable penetration. And as you can see, 88.4% of renewable resources, and we have only 11% of dispatchable capacity that's needed to serve system reliably, affordably, and environmentally responsible. I think that's my last slide. And we do have our next community engagement on November 2nd. We are going to talk, we had our previous IRP discussion in June, where we talked about the process, and now we are going to talk about what has been done in the last 6 months, all the studies. We'll share all our study results. It will be posted, and then you can also kind of ask questions to the experts. And the next one is November 13th at Longmont. The team is going to be here for any detailed specific questions. And there's another way you can request or submit your questions is send an email to 2024irp@prpa.org. We'll take those questions and respond to those questions. So again, that is the process. We are very excited with the clean energy transition. There are lots of challenges, but we are going to integrate renewable resources in our portfolio, but reliably and affordable.
So Raj, thank you very much, Jason and Raj, for this presentation. It's a lot. It's a lot to follow and digest.
That was a short version.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. I've sat through the long ones.
I can tell Raj is passionate.
Yes, extremely, and very, very smart. So at last month's PRPA board meeting, I had questions about the purchase of the aeroderivative jet engine, and the use of hydrogen, those engines those turbines being able to use hydrogen. And you explained a little bit. I asked him really fast because I had another meeting to get back to. So I want to actually continue that a little bit.
Okay.
Was that me? Sorry. So you said that they are able to use green hydrogen, but from what I just heard is that our water supply can't be dependent upon am I correct in saying that can't always be dependent upon?
So there are two things we're talking about. One is the hydro allocation, which is the megawatt hour energy.
Yeah.
And we do get water. We already have water at the site that will be, we will be using that water available at the Rawhide Energy Station to take the H2O molecule and break it into hydrogen and oxygen. And the way we would do is the excess energy, renewable energy that we will have in the system, that is the one that will be used to do this electrolysis process to capture the hydrogen. So it's the water at the site.
So if we do purchase those turbines, why could we not immediately use hydrogen instead of gas?
So the reason is the whole process of splitting or the electrolyzer, it's still being researched, and it's same as the R&D of long duration storage. There has been a lot of work progress, and even Inflation Reduction Act does allow for green hydrogen production. There are benefits as well. So we will not have as much hydrogen that is needed to run the plant yet. So we start with blending, and then slowly we start using one resource. So the short answer to this long question is, it is because the technology is not there where we would like it to be, to use hydrogen as the primary resource or the primary fuel for for aeroderivative.
Okay. I know that we're using, and I know that this term has changed, the peakers. What are those called now? There's a different name.
So actually, the terms have not changed, but the way when we use the word peakers, it was in my older days, when we used to plan for serving our load, we used to use the term peakers because they don't run as much, and they are used when there's a peak electric demand.
Right.
So they are used when you have demand. Now we are but that's not what we are going to be using now. It's dispatchable capacity. These resources are going to be quick start, rapid start, and ramp up and down. So these resources are helping balancing the renewable resources and the load requirements very quickly if we have an issue. So the idea, the concept is these resources are going to be flexible or dispatchable. That's the term. So it's dispatchability always was there. The term but the system, electric system didn't have as much variability in the supply. So that's the need of the day, is to have dispatchable resources in the system.
So is there technology advances to retrofit or bring more advanced peakers online that would be less expensive than the turbines, that would power up faster than they do now, the ones we have now?
So the technology is
difference?
always evolving, and as you have heard, like IRP is a continuous process. As
Right.
new emerging technologies will come, we will integrate it. Is the cost going to change? The technology always advances. So the idea would be, I hope there is a breakthrough in, storage, and we can start seeing the cost of storage going down, or we would like to see more of storage is available. Then, that would be a better solution. But it's, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but the idea is the costs are, it's one aspect, but the emerging technologies are more promising from hydrogen or storage rather than just peaker to turbines.
So what I'm really trying to do is get to some of the answers from the emails that we've had, that we do not, the residents who are really the ones who are paying for all of this in all 4 communities, how can we get to distributed energy without pushing gas, selling it, or we probably have to purchase it during peak hours? So what, and I see Marcia shaking her head at me. So, do you have a nexus yet between the cost of the turbines and the cost of, for example, you were talking about 100-hour storage? Do you have a cost nexus between that? Because my fear is we're going to buy these turbines, which are incredibly expensive. And by the time we get up and rolling to move them, the cost of storage and the availability of storage will be there. And we've already invested in these very expensive turbines.
So let me take that one.
Okay.
First of all, they're not very expensive. They're by far the lowest cost option that we have to integrate the amount of renewables that we're putting on the system. If you were to just say order of magnitude, what's the difference between the dispatchable capacity of 200 megawatts and what it provides to the system and the equivalent of long duration storage to do that? It's probably about 6x in cost, right? You're talking about several $1 billion of expenditures for batteries if we could get them ordered now and we could get them installed by 2028, which neither one of those things can we do right now as we sit here.
Okay.
And so the way I look at the new turbines is that really what they are is an enabler of a deeper level of decarbonization. If you remember the slide I showed where we're adding more, doubling wind and we're quadrupling solar, right, as we move along, we have to have something on the system to balance that out as we put those on. We've done some scenarios without the turbines, and we're stuck at about 60%. That's as much as we can balance with Rawhide Unit 1, because that's the only thing we have left on the system prior to 2030 to balance. That and the market, and hopefully some 4-hour storage in your owner communities, and hopefully some long-duration storage, but not to that scale. And if you look at the pie that Raj talked about, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of questions about stranded assets, okay? People say, well, why? Well, first of all, I find it ironic because we're shutting down Rawhide Unit 1 early that's paid for. And that's tens of millions of dollars, right, in decommissioning cost, right, and dealing with on our balance sheet to shut that down, right? These turbines are mobile. These turbines can be resold. These turbines, Raj is correct, when we get to synthetic fuels, I'll just leave it at synthetic fuels.
Okay.
Right? That's going to make them less carbon intensive as we move forward, right? But I can tell you, being part of the Southwest Power Pool, that there are going to be hundreds of these turbines within that footprint, managing all of the renewables in that system. And so whether we no longer need them in 2040 or 2045 or whenever that is, somebody will. And so I don't see them as a stranded asset at all. I see it as the opposite. I see it as the least cost way to maintain reliability and meet the obligations that we've committed to the state and that we promise you to get as far as we can by 2030. We can run as many models as we want, but if you eliminate that technology, we're stuck. Your earlier question about the existing turbines, that you're right, the citizens also paid for, that technology is very specific. They're made to come on at 3 o'clock, they're made to go off at 9 o'clock at night on a hot summer day, and they operate within a range, and they have emissions requirements that you have to stay within. Those units aren't made to move up and down. So if you take, we have two kinds. We have one 128 megawatt turbine. The lowest it can operate and stay in emissions compliance is 80 megawatts. So you have to. So you can see how you get caught into these roles. It can't go from 0 to 100 back down to 0 and stay within emission ranges in all those categories. It's great between 80 and 128, and the EAs, the smaller units, are good between 40 and 65, and there's 4 of those. And so you get into increments. So they're really designed, the metallurgy in them, right, and the life expectancy in them, they're made to start up, to warm up, to ramp up, to pretty much sit there at full load. That's when they're the most efficient, and to ramp back down. These turbines, these aeroderivative technologies, jet engine, just like an airplane lands, shuts off. New people get on board, fires up again, and it takes off. Very similar technology, made to go from 0 to 100 back down to 0 very rapidly, just like renewables are. If you go to prpa.org, what we do, and look at our load page, we've had it out there for almost a year now. The reason we did was hoping that people would look at it and see the intermittency of renewables and see the challenge, right? And look at that and go, wow, well, we're going to have twice as much wind and 4 times more solar, so that volatility is going to be much greater. How are we going to manage it? We manage it right now with our coal units, right? But as it gets exponentially more on the system and those are shut down, something has to take its place.
Okay, I wanted residents to hear that explanation. So thank you for that. But Jason, I would also like to know what the other cities, the conversations they're having. So can we put this on the agenda on Thursday to talk about what the residents have asking and what the other cities are hearing?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
My question is, the other cities are having these conversations with their residents as well. And I would like, at the PRPA meeting on Thursday, to hear what the other cities, if we're all hearing the same thing.
Sure. I mean, we always have that section of the board meeting where you go around the table, so I'm sure the other mayors and utility directors would be happy to weigh in. You're the last, not on purpose, council that we presented to. We've been to Estes, we've been to Fort Collins, and, obviously been to Loveland.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck, and thank you for this presentation. I want you to know that I look at that consumption and production chart often, so it was not for naught.
I appreciate you looking at it. I look at it often myself.
Yeah. Okay, so I have 5 questions, and you, I think, have a copy of my 5 questions. Because my speech is timed, I'm going to ask them all at once, and that's why you have a copy, so that then you can answer them all at once, too. In each question, I'm looking for a policy or regulatory answer, not technical clarification. To dispense with the temptation to do technical explanations, let me say that I accept that the need for dispatchable resources is real. I'm glad to welcome Mr. Jason Frisbee here tonight, and I expect, Jason, that you can decide who can give the best answers to these questions. One is about resolution number 11-23, which will come before the PRPA's Board of Directors on Thursday. There's a lot of speculation about what it actually does. It's about dispatchable resources. why does PRPA leadership feel that it's necessary to bring this resolution now, so far in advance of the IRP? The second question is what the resolution actually does. Does support mean authorize? Is this the only approval that PRPA needs from the board in order to go forward with its expenditures to build these 4 aeroderivative turbines, or not? Does it change the board's process at all? Third, what regulatory agency determines how much firm dispatchable capacity PRPA must either own or contract for by some sort of power purchase agreement, and what is that requirement in nameplate megawatts? 4, the preliminary proposal for a thermal dispatchable resource now involves 4 aeroderivative gas turbines of special characteristics and 50 megawatts each. Would these plants be built all at once, or can their construction be phased over time, allowing us to maybe put the brakes on if new technology emerges that is less carbon intensive? And 5, Governor Polis has set the goal of having all electricity consumed in Colorado be carbon free by the year 2040. There are still risks and unknowns associated with net zero fuels. A natural gas turbine constructed circa 2027, which I believe is your target, would not reach its natural end of life until 2057. What's PRPA's plan to make the ratepayers whole? And Jason, I do believe you touched on this. If the new gas turbines must sunset early by Colorado law. So
I'll jump in here.
Thanks.
Some of these answers, I don't know anybody that can answer them without some technical justification, because some of them are technical in nature. But let me touch on the first couple, because I think they're more policy-driven. And then I think Raj already touched on 3 a little bit, but I'll let him take 3 and 4, and then I'll jump back in on 5. So the resolution that the board is considering this Thursday, the dispatchable resources, why does PRPA leadership feel it's necessary to bring this resolution now? I think I touched on this when I was talking to Joan. I think that it's the enabler to get us as far as fast. When I look at the resource diversification policy and we do all the modeling and the goal 0, call it aspirational, call it what you want, but to go as far as fast as we can and maintain the 3 pillars of the organization. Every time we model, when we modeled in 2020, when we modeled in 2022, when we modeled in 2024, right? These resources, are necessary for us to continue to make progress on the resource diversification policy. So why do we feel it's necessary to do it now? Because it's going to take us 5 years from right now to get them in place. Next year's budget that the board's also hearing, they heard last month, they're here this month, and ultimately approve in December, includes expenditures next year, because we've got to go through a permitting process with the state of Colorado. That will take a year. It will take another year, right, to work through a contract, depending on where we're at in line. We view this as about a 5-year process when we hit the go button right now, to have them in somewhere in 27 or 28. So that'd be my answer to the first one.
But is this an authorization to make the expenditures
That's
to do that?
question 2, haven't got there yet.
Okay.
You want me to go to 2?
No, if you've got more on number 1,
No,
please
I don't
do.
think I have any more on 1, but I can jump to 2 if you want.
Sure, yes.
Yeah, so let me be 100% clear about 2. The authorization, the resolution was our idea to say, hey, look, board, we want to know if you support us moving in this direction. We've done modeling for 4 years now, and we're coming to the same answer, and we've talked to all 400 communities. We think this is the least cost, most reliable way to maintain affordability. I don't, as the CEO, need the board's approval to buy the gas turbines. That's well within my authorization as the CEO. I may not be employed, but it's clearly within my authorization, as it was to shut down Rawhide Unit 1. But I make it a standard practice, as I'm sure Harold does, because we have multiple bosses, to keep them informed, to be transparent, and make sure I understand exactly where they're at in the process. And so it isn't the only approval. It is, we don't technically need the approval at all. But I would say to you, Marcia, that ongoing budgets, the ultimate board control is the approval of the budget. I don't have the authorization to approve the budget. And so when we look at a series of expenditures that are going to take place over several years, and perhaps going into the market to borrow money for a portion of this, then we want to take a look at that over a period of time and make sure that this board is in agreement with the direction that we're going.
Thank you.
Raj, I'll let you take 3.
Oh, okay, thank you. So the requirement is set, I mentioned WEC, which is Western Electricity Coordinating Council, one of the regional entities. They are responsible for setting the reliability standards for Western interconnections, and they set these requirements. That's step 1. And we are also going to be part of the SPP RTO West market, which was announced. They have this requirement under resource adequacy. Under resource adequacy, we do have to bring in capacity, and that also sets how much capacity we have to carry. So these two kind of drive how much reserve margins we carry, and how is that reserve margin set is obviously how much. There is a lower solar and wind accreditation, but storage and thermal get different accreditation. It's the combination of all that makes up how much reserve margins we carry.
Yes, and I understand that this is a work in progress that you're negotiating, and they will come up with some firm requirements about dispatchable capacity at some point. What is it so far?
So
in
as
megawatts?
So 15% of our peak load, I'm not doing the math correctly in my head, so if our peak load is 800 megawatts, we would have to have at least 100 megawatts of planning reserve margin requirements.
Except that you said earlier that it's 20 to 25.
You said current is 15%.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
Current in the negotiation process.
again,
How much do they think you're going to need?
So again, just to be clear, there is no negotiation here. It's a
Okay.
requirement. We have to meet those standards. This is not to negotiate with SPPs, Southwest Power Pool, nor with WEC. These are standard operating procedures that we have to maintain. So given our analysis.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I do math in my head all the time, right?
So
Sometimes I get in
crazy
trouble.
math.
It's 200 megawatts in 2030 is the answer to your question. 200
Okay.
megawatts of reserve.
Yeah, all right, and that was my question,
Fair, right?
because,
80 times,
800 megawatts, 20%, 160. So-
yeah.
I'm going with 25.
Okay.
So okay, good, that's very helpful, that 200 megawatts is a 25% dispatchable reserve. And it's not a negotiation, I should have said maybe an analysis, because the WEC people have to look and see what your system is like.
WEC people have to look at the entire Western interconnection. They look at each load serving entity. SPP looks at each load serving entity, looks at their peak load, and tells that this is the reserve margin requirement you have to carry to participate as a member of SPP RTO West. So this is a concept that has been there forever. Other markets, Eastern Interconnection, PJM, MISO, they all have this. So this has been a standard.
Okay,
One thing I would say, Marcia, I think it relates to this question quite a bit, is if you look at the predominant markets throughout the United States and you look at the reports that I see, they're all struggling with what's the appropriate amount. And with this deeper level of renewable penetration and looking at what's taken place in Texas and ERCOT and looking at what's taken place in MISO, in New York and everywhere else, I think it's safe to say they're going to continue to increase because nobody wants to go through what's taken place over the last couple of years, right? So even if it's in our business, it's always better to be a little more conservative than not, because, and I've said this to this council and every council that I present to and our board, at its most fundamental level, this is a public health and safety service that we provide. It matters when it's 20 below. It matters when it's 105 degrees out. We don't have the flexibility that maybe a utility in California has that's not worried about somebody dying because it's 62 degrees outside in the middle of winter. We
Yeah.
have to factor those in here.
and understand, I am not challenging your technological approach. I think it's essentially correct. What I'm trying to do is set the expectations and the parameters that you're operating under so that everybody understands.
Sure.
Okay, and then.
Number four?
Okay. Number 4 was the timeline of whether we will integrate at the same time. So I wish I could give a yes/no answer to this, but the thing is, many utilities that are in this journey of renewable integration are implementing dispatchable resources in their system. The EPC cost, getting engineering and procurement in place, the cost would be low if we do all 4 at the same time. That is what it is. The engineering design, the people come in and we order equipment. The cost savings are huge when we do all at the same time, rather than putting it in reserves and then using it for another 2 years, bringing in
Okay,
people.
so it's your current intent, because of cost, to implement all 200 megawatts at once?
Right, and it is, again, okay, the reason is there is, many other utilities are in the same boat. The EPC will become a little bit challenging.
I think it's more than that, though. I would jump in. I think it's supply chain issues. I think that if we try to do them one at a time, and I agree with Raj 100%, it'd be more expensive, but we may not get them installed within the time frame that we need them. By the way, we did the same thing after we learned the first time when we added the peaking units up at RIDE. The first peaking unit we added was Unit A by itself. By the time it was up and operational, during that period of time, the early 2000s, load was growing so quickly that we realized we needed to add another one. We stopped and said, wait a minute, what's the cost of doing 2 at that point in time? And that's what we did. And then we designed the third one so they want their crews to come on site and go from one to the next, to the next, to the next. Because it's not just the cost we negotiate with the supplier, but it's also the labor cost, it's the MOB, it's the demob charges. They want to get it all done at once. So I think there's several reasons to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on the last one. I think as you mentioned, I think I touched on this a little bit, but this idea of, certainly you're right, there's risks with net zero fuels. There's no doubt about that. I think there's a lot of money being thrown at it through the IRA. And I think there's certain areas of the country, based upon geographically where they sit and the loads that they serve, that we'll be able to learn a lot from. But the one thing I want to impress upon this council is we have a huge strategic advantage at the RIDE Energy Station in the fact that we have land and we have water and we have staff. So we're in an ideal situation up there to be able to build, construct, bring people in, to generate hydrogen right there on site. So the problem with hydrogen right now is, and I know Raj touched on this a little bit, but it's the storage of it. And it's the ability to have it when you need it on a volumetric basis that's going to be the challenge, not just with us, but everyone else around the United States. I am not concerned as your CEO about these becoming stranded assets at all.
I didn't use that word.
Yeah, I know you didn't. I don't, but a lot of people have. I don't see it that way. I think if you just look at it from a cost perspective, and you look at a $300 million investment roughly, right, over a 30-year depreciated basis, depending on what cost of money is for you to borrow, and we're not going to have to borrow all $300 million because of the way we do rate smoothing and other things and our liquidity at the organization. It's not even close what the next most economical option is to stay on track at this point in time. If we jump in on unproven long-duration storage at scale to the tune of several $billion, that could be a huge problem for us as an organization. When utilities make mistakes like that, ratepayers are asked to pay for them for the next 30 years. And we take that responsibility seriously. That's why we go through this iterative process, and that's why we constantly balance this through that same lens of reliability, affordability, and environmental responsibility. We're always looking at it through those 3 lenses. People ask me all the time, which one's most important? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, you have to look, you can't, I don't know how you could look at them separately, right? Because we can't afford to have perfect reliability. no utility in the country had.
You guys come pretty close, actually.
We do come pretty close at a very affordable rate. And I think it's up to, one of the beauties, I think, of the way that the resource diversification policy was constructed is that you, councils, and through representation of your board members and your owner communities through your rates, get to define what's affordable. You really do, right? I have smart people. We can put together budgets. We have a strategic financial plan. We're updating the board on it here on Thursday. We need, we want to stay at a certain debt service ratio. We want to have a certain amount of liquidity. We want to have a certain credit rating when we go in the market. We've done a good job at that. We can tell you, and we're very good at telling you what our rates need to be. But as Daryl talked about, you also have costs on the distribution side of the equation. And you also have to look at, is that affordable for your citizens in your communities? And so, we take a long-term view of rates, and we try to make sure that you understand where we think they're going so that you can fold those into your own calculus with what you need as well in your owner communities.
So I think that all the questions were answered from my perspective. Counselor Martin?
Yeah. I think
Okay,
so.
great. Thank you for that. One
Does that
more.
bell mean I went over, or what? Is that bell for me, or what? Oh,
Okay, so Counselor McCoy had a question, but he very. I'll ask you later. Thank you. Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Jason.
you're welcome. Thanks for having us down. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Daryl. Let's take a 5-minute break. Our 5 minutes are up about 5 minutes ago.
Electric service specific, which is second reading.
On second reading, she's pulling that. So where's Dawn? We are waiting for our city clerk. So the next thing on our agenda is public invited to be heard. And remember that only the residents and city employees can speak on first call public invited to be heard. The first one on our list is Georgetta Johnson. Oh, Georgetta. No, but there is a lovely woman before you, and she needs to catch a bus, so you can be second. Okay. Audrey Dunn?
Good evening. I'm Audrey Dunn, 2000 Sunset Way. Thank you for allowing me to come back tonight. I don't really have a speech to give you, but I do have issues about the construction that is going on down at the Sweets. A lot of residents from 2 weeks ago complained about not being able to access the shops at the Village at the Peaks. There's no way in or out safely without tripping on sidewalks or upsetting power wheelchairs to get there. And I'm one of them. I use a power wheelchair when I need to. Excuse me. It's very, very bad area. The pavement is bad. It can upset a power wheelchair very easily. The sidewalks on the east side of car dealership, boy, my voice is disappearing here. Car dealership on the east side is very narrow. And you can very easily drive your power wheelchair off that sidewalk and into the grassy area and get stuck. There's no way out without help. And that's not safe. And another thing is, this does not fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Excuse me for a minute here. It doesn't fall under the reasonable accessibility under the Americans with the Disabilities Act. We were told that both driveways on the south side and our parking lot heading into the church next door is totally blocked. The driveway on the west side of the parking lot is going to be available to emergency vehicles only. That's not right and it's not fair. The sidewalk just on the north side of the property is blocked off with a barrier. I have no idea why you can't get through there at all with that barrier standing there. What are we supposed to do? How are we going to get from the Sweets to the Village at the Peaks safely if nothing is open for us? That is wrong. It's not right. That takes our freedom away to move around. America was founded on the Constitution for freedom. Our freedoms are being taken away down there. We had no idea that they were going to start building any kind of construction work at all. No one came to us to get ideas and feedback on this. We're totally left in the dark. No communication at all. What are we supposed to do? How are we going to get out safely without becoming injured on that property? This has got to be looked into. It's got to be solved. If anybody wants to come down to the switch and take a look around, I encourage you to do it, and you will see what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Don't have to take my word for it. If I still say it is wrong, it's limiting our access under the Americans with Disabilities Act law.
Okay.
Period.
Sir? Could you tell her the time, sir?
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Harold, can somebody get with her? Thank you very much. Georgetta Johnston.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening, Georgetta Johnston, 320 Homestead Parkway, Longmont, Colorado, 80504. Good evening, Miss Lovely Mayor and nice City Council. Thank you for letting me talk. I come as for a good town and a caring citizen to talk about the different things that I feel like we're not getting anywhere with. The Art and Entertainment Center for musicals, the Longmont Chorale, which I went, the Symphony Orchestra, the band concert, the high school plays, competition, all kinds of things. Our business is going out of Longmont now. Also, of course, the ice skating rink. I don't understand. What's people wanting? You know, I don't want high taxes, but what's people spending their money on? That's what I feel like. The library, I'm okay with the library. I've done that before if we need more. The swimming pool, the recreation center. But I'm thinking, what is going on with this city? Seriously, because all these are in other places around us. And when I just went to hear the Longmont Chorale, there is people from Loveland, and there's people from Denver, there's people from all over the place. So, myself, and I go for good churches too, that's the most important thing. But Lord help us, all of us precious people. And whoever's listening to me talk, I don't want to be the only one, but we want a good city. And I'm thinking breweries and marijuanas and different things. What do we want and how are we wanting to raise our children? I'm an older lady, and I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. But I care about our city, so that's why I came tonight. I made this years ago in Church for Kids. It has all kinds of things that recommend good people, which we are. So, you know, Lord help us. Some way, somehow, make a way for all this. Because how are we spending our money? What is our money about? That's what I'm thinking. Of course, we need a house. But we also need good, wonderful things in this city. So Lord bless you and help us some way, somehow to work out this stuff. I didn't add my other things tonight because this is interesting. And I hope people go and vote and care about this. In some way we work it in because I've talked to a lot of people want to give. So myself, I don't really understand. So anyway, Lord bless you. Thank you for listening to me and keep doing a good job. And Lord help us all.
Thank you, Georgetta. Wendell Pickett.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Wendell Gene Pickett, 3813 Florentine Circle, Longmont, Colorado, 80503. I'm here to speak about 9A and B, of which I can hardly believe I say this, but I really support changing the fee in lieu and increasing it. And frankly, I'd like to challenge you guys to look 3 to 5 years in the future and set on a course to where every project delivers either off-site or on-site the affordable units that go with that project. That will take considerable effort in policy reforms and some specific ordinances to make that happen. But that has happened in other municipalities and can happen in Longmont. So we stop digging the hole whenever we have new construction. We get the matching actual units delivered. But as for tonight, on the specific ordinance of A and B, while I support the increase, and what I would like to ask for is consideration, because projects, as you know, have become much more difficult because the easy projects are done. Projects being done now often have to solve multiple problems, infrastructure problems, drainage problems, neighbors problems to get done, and that certainty in development is what is truly valued by developers such as myself. Whenever you go in and you put in a project and you go through the first and second round, oftentimes, and I've heard this from the city, we didn't even know to ask a particular question until we got through 1 or 2 rounds of engineering and submissions. You've built the pro formas, you've spent a lot of time and effort and money to get to that point, and to have a fee like this quadruple or triple, really is difficult to figure out how to absorb. I would like to ask that you guys consider, when implementing this fee, that you look at the projects that are already in submission, and that this fee be tied back, like the building permit fees, to the time of submission and acceptance of a project by the city, not to the time of plat. Because right now, there's a lot of variables. Not only do you get through all the public staff work, the public hearings, then council, then the threat of a lawsuit. That timeline is often elongated to 2 to 3 years. So I would ask that in adopting and refining A and B, that you look at how the building code is done, and when you submit to building, you are locked into that code that you submit under, just as if instead of you guys adopting a new code and you have to go redraw and retake everything. So appreciate your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendell. Eric Frankowski.
My name is Eric Frankowski. I live at 4518 Lucca Drive, LUCCA, here in Longmont. I am the board treasurer of Sustainable Resilient Longmont, and this statement is being made on behalf of the organization. All of you should have received an email earlier with a position statement from Sustainable Resilient Longmont regarding the vote on a resolution by the Platte River Power Authority Board this Thursday, giving PRPA an authorization to form a contractual agreement to purchase an aeroderivative methane gas plant as part of the replacement power for the Rawhide coal plant. The following is an abbreviated version of that statement in recognition of the 3-minute limit. Platte River is currently working on its next integrated resource plan, which will be submitted next year, and any action to procure significant amounts of new capacity outside of that process is grossly premature. The IRP process allows for public involvement and a comprehensive vetting of all alternatives for acquiring new generating resources. Pushing through a resolution allowing Platte River to begin contracting for significant amounts of new methane capacity completely outside of the IRP process is financially risky, with the potential to leave Platte River's member cities stuck with hundreds of millions of dollars in stranded assets. It would also be contrary to the tenets of transparency and a breach of Longmont's commitment to 100% clean renewable energy by 2030, which the council approved by resolution in 2018. SRL strongly urges Longmont's Platte River Board representatives to require that plans to purchase aeroderivative turbines instead be placed into the next IRP, where they can be fully analyzed in comparison to alternatives. There are numerous variables that must be weighed before giving a green light to a project with a projected $250 million price tag, an amount that Platte River's customers will be paying off for decades. Platte River has made various claims about needing to move forward now with its plans for a gas plant, including a commitment to fueling it partially with green hydrogen. The only way to ensure that those claims are legitimate and can be verified, especially in the context of rapidly evolving clean energy technology and declining costs is through the IRP process. Longmont has formally committed to a future that is powered by 100% clean renewable energy no later than 2030. Under this proposal, the city will not meet that commitment. SRL opposes the premise that fossil fuels can't be eliminated, and we therefore formally ask that the Longmont board members of Platte River oppose the resolution vote on Thursday and instead defer any major procurement decisions to take place only through the IRP process. On a personal note, let me say that in a professional capacity, I have worked throughout the entire interior West, from Montana to Arizona, on resource planning processes for utilities. I do it in coalitions from Montana to Arizona. Every time I hear a utility say, our modeling shows, we have experts who show that that modeling isn't quite correct and that there are new and different variables that play into the equation and that new modeling can be different. Thank you very much for the time tonight.
Thank you. Lance Whitaker.
Mayor and Council, my name is Lance Whitaker. I live at 1750 Collier Street. As you know, I've lived in Longmont for about 45 years, and today is National United Nations Day. It's also National Bologna Day and National Food Day, so take that as what you want. Hydrogen is fun, but storage is not so fun. So if you've ever made hydrogen in your kitchen, you'll know you don't want too big of a balloon in your backyard. You guys have a good day.
So Lance, I'm not sure bologna is food.
I don't know if it's food either.
Jamie Quirk.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Jamie Quirk, 1820 Faith Place. I've never known a life without public libraries. Amid many moves throughout childhood and adulthood, libraries remained a constant, a reassuring source of stability, a home. When my family arrived in Longmont in 2021, the library was a destination second in urgency only to King Soopers, a priority in settling into a new city. I've been an editor, educator, and administrator, and I've learned that whatever one needs, the library is a great place to start. And the libraries in every place I lived, larger cities, tiny hamlets, and much in between, were reflections of what those communities valued most: equality, knowledge, literacy, and connection. What a community invests in says a lot. So does how a community defines need. What I found in Longmont was a beautiful, vibrant city boasting great restaurants and shops, amazing parks and rec centers, and a packed calendar of cultural events. After 2 years, it's still that place, but I've also grown more attuned to the inequities that challenge us. What I've learned once I was able to see beyond my privilege as someone with reliable transportation, internet access, and discretionary income is that need is not always visible. Need is not always audible either, which is why I'm here tonight. Residents like me are used to driving to the library, conveniently parking and finding what they need with ease. What a bright, spacious building, what helpful staff. But it's my neighbor experiencing housing insecurity, the teenager down the street who just can't go home, the friend who needs support in teaching their child to read, who may need more. Speaking with staff and community members, I know that much programming is stretched to the limits of capacity, study spaces are booked, and the cost to expand online services and materials to meet our population size is increasing. Our library is more lifeline than luxury, and so November 7th, I'll be thinking not about books on shelves. I'll be thinking about the mother who can't drive across town to story time, the middle school kid who just wishes for a space where they can feel safe and seen, the gentleman without a home computer. I hope ballot measure 3C passes in November. However, even if it doesn't, I ask council to remember that all of Longmont's residents deserve to experience the full spectrum of our library's magic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Lynette McLean.
Hi, Mayor Peck and City Council. This is Lynette McLean, and I live at 763 Sandpoint Drive. And I am representing the Longmont climate community tonight. I just wanted to talk, let me pull up about the PRPA proposal. The PRPA Board of Directors are going to vote on a proposal from PRPA administration to give them power to contract for a methane gas plant. I think it's on Thursday. And this proposal bypasses the Integrated Resources Plan, or the IRP, which will be submitted next year. There's a lack of transparency in doing this outside of the IRP process, and eliminating community input, it keeps us all in the dark. So building this methane plant commits us to 30 more years of using fossil fuels. And PRPA says they're going to be able to use green hydrogen as a fuel, but this is not in existence yet. And it may never be possible. So currently hydrogen is made with methane. Fossil fuel extraction is polluting our area here in Longmont, and some days we have the worst air quality of anywhere else in the world. Continued use of methane is going to add to our climate change. So there are many new technologies for storage and for revamping the current turbines to use until those new technologies are available for purchase. But we have to eliminate fossil fuels. And we need to be stewards of our bioregion. And we need to stop basing our decisions on profit. If we move with this resolution, if we move forward with this, we do not believe that climate change is here and we're not taking it seriously. And I guess I want to ask PRPA, what's the cost of not doing this? Because they're talking about cost. They didn't talk at all about fossil fuel retirement. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. Steve Altshuler. I think he left. Diane Christ? She left. Let's see who's left here. Stanley Toll? There he is.
I'm Stan Toll. 2001 Terry Street here in Longmont. And I came and talked a while back, and every time the council decided to meet, my system decided to be sick. So what I briefly talked about was being woke on traffic issues in this city. And this is not just our city, but the whole country, according to Bloomberg. It's a problem that they are telling us that it's mostly the design of our streets and how we go about designing our streets. And being woke means to be educated and aware, and that's usually talked about in social justice and racial equality, but I think woke can also apply to how we look at our traffic, how we design our roads here in this city. And I'm encouraging the council members to actually get themselves woke, because the rest of the world, according to Bloomberg, is getting better on traffic safety, and we are going worse. We've had an increase in fatality rate of 10% since 2020. That's 3 years, 10% increase. So what I mentioned last time was looking into roundabouts. And I looked at a traffic safety survey that was given to you council members on different plans for traffic safety, and it didn't mention roundabouts. And hopefully, I'll try to send you some information about Carmel. But Carmel had a tremendous reduction in traffic fatalities by essentially getting rid of a lot of their stoplights. But then again, it's also the attitude, because whenever there's an accident here in town, and what this person on Not Just Bikes mentioned, that in the Netherlands, when there's an accident, they don't try to just figure out who's at fault. They try to figure out how this could have been avoided even if somebody made a mistake. And my few interactions with the Longmont police when there's been an accident, it seems that they're all quickly want to identify who's at fault, and they get money for that because there's a ticket and fine, and then they tow the vehicles and they make money off of that.
Thank you, Stan.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no one on the list, I'm going to close first call public invited to be heard. We're now at the consent agenda. Oh, Matthew, you're not on the list. Sure. Well, what are you speaking on? Is it on the second reading? Why didn't you sign the list?
Because it was taken away before I got up, and then I was trying to understand what was on the list at what time. So.
Okay.
Is this kosher?
Yeah, you're kosher.
Thank you. Council, thanks. I want to speak on two quick topics here. Well, they're not quick, they're extremely dense. The first is with regard to the PRPA presentation earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Matthew Popkin, 852 Missouri Avenue, Southmore Park. Thank you. The first topic was in regard to the PRPA presentation, and I don't want to speak on the modeling. I don't want to speak on the technologies. There's been a lot of really interesting discussion and informative presentation on that. What I want to speak to is on process. And you might be thinking, Matthew, why are you going to talk about process with us? That's so boring. We've been here for already 2.5 hours. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about procurement. It's even better. And what I wanted to speak to specifically is how utilities go to the market to procure new technology and generation. And there's a process called all-source RFPs, or all-source requests for proposal, which are technology neutral, objective aligned, and prioritize least regret options. And the reason I bring this up is because that's the direction that I hope, as a ratepayer, as a customer in Longmont, that PRPA takes the approach to do that, such that they are getting the most updated, latest and greatest responses from the market. It's one that doesn't say, hey, let's go and specifically buy this technology. It says, let's go buy this that achieves these purposes: operational flexibility, resilience, reliability, affordability. And if PRPA is taking that approach, then I'm very comfortable with their approach to the market and how they can try to achieve the goals, the ambitious and innovative targets that have been set by the communities. That's the first point of this. I've also spoken to this council on energy efficiency in the past, and this seems like no better time than ever to bring this up again. There were a lot of numbers thrown out in the previous presentations on PRPA's resource planning process and their modeling, and I want to give you a couple more numbers. It was said that Longmont's capacity was about 190 megawatts. The largest municipal utility in the country in San Antonio, Texas, they ran an energy efficiency program over 12 years that basically saved the equivalent of a power plant. The power plant in their context, at their scale, is 926 megawatts, 5 times what Longmont consumes in full. And so I share that to highlight the value of energy efficiency in all of these broader conversations. It's not just, oh, Matthew, that's cute. Let's screw in that light bulb a little bit tighter. Let's make sure we have the right technology for that light bulb. It really makes a difference on a large scale. That you might be asking, how much does that cost? We've talked about cost a lot today. That was $2.7 dollars in benefit to $1 in every cost spent for that program. So I bring this up to think about, we've been talking about what's the least regret option, what's the least cost option, what's the least risk, what's the most affordable option. Energy efficiency still is that. And the most cost-effective dollar we spend on electricity is the dollar we don't spend on electricity. So as we think about how this goes forward in the modeling process, as Longmont Power and Communications continues to think about its investments in Efficiency Works and other programming, energy efficiency needs to be on that list because that is an effective, reliable, low-cost, and low-risk solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we are closed. First call, public invited to be heard. And moving on to the consent agenda. Dawn, would you mind reading the items into the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor. The ordinances on this agenda will be on second reading and public hearing on November 14th, 2023. Item 9A is ordinance 2023-59, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 4.79 of the Longmont Municipal Code on fee waivers for attainable housing. 9B is ordinance 2023-60, a bill for an ordinance amending Section 1505220 of the Longmont Municipal Code on inclusionary housing. 9C are the 2024 budget resolutions. C1 is Resolution 2023-81, a resolution amending the financial policies of the City of Longmont for 2024. C2 is Resolution 2023-81, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the City of Longmont 2024 classification and pay plan for city employees. 9D is Resolution R 2023-82, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing the transfer of a portion of the unencumbered appropriation balance of the Workers' Compensation Insurance Fund to the Liability Self-Insurance Fund. 9E is Resolution 2023-83, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing the transfer of a portion of the unencumbered appropriation balance of the Employee Benefit Fund to the Employee Pension Fund and the Police Pension Fund. 9F is Resolution 2023-84, a resolution of the Longmont City Council adopting a revised investment policy for the city. 9G is Resolution 2023-85, a resolution of the Longmont City Council adopting a revised debt policy for the city, setting forth objectives and defining guidelines, constraints, and responsibilities regarding fiscally prudent debt management. 9H is Resolution 2023-86, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing the First Amendment to redevelopment and reimbursement agreement for the Village at the Peaks development among the City of Longmont, the Longmont Urban Renewal Authority, the Twin Peaks Metropolitan District, and NMMS Twin Peaks LLC. 9I is Resolution 2023-87, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an intergovernmental agreement between City of Longmont and Boulder County Sheriff's Office for fire mitigation services at Button Rock Preserve. 9J is Resolution 2023-88, a resolution of the Longmont City Council encouraging Longmont Museum be funded at a level comparable with other facilities in other municipalities. And 9K is approved 5 capital improvement program amendments. And Mayor, staff would like to pull 9B.
Thank you, Dawn. Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I'd like to pull 9A and 9J.
Would you like to move the consent agenda?
If there are no other,
No one else is in.
then I'm going to move the consent agenda with items 9A, B, and J pulled for later consideration.
Okay, that has been moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. Now we're down to the ordinances on second reading and public hearings on any matter. A is a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 14.32 on rates and regulations governing electric service. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing on 2023-47. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Can I have a motion? Who? Matthew, you would like to come on down. Thank you, I didn't see that.
Sorry, I need to learn to raise my hand even higher. Hello, Council. Again, Matthew Popkin, 852 Missouri Avenue. I want to speak on Resolution 10A regarding the electric rate increase. I just want to say the proposed electric rate increase is a smart, responsible, and necessary change. No one likes their rates increasing, but sometimes there are smart times to make investments in our infrastructure, and I believe this time is one of them. The presentation we heard earlier spoke about smart grid investments, infrastructure updates, maintenance upgrades, undergrounding wires for greater resilience, community solar, energy storage. These new investments are needed to maintain and build on a safe, reliable, and efficient electric grid. These necessary costs to manage and upgrade infrastructure in Longmont are necessary, especially given climate change risks that we face and extreme weather risks that we face. The more we can invest in undergrounding utility infrastructure, the less susceptible those are to damage from events that are outside of our control, and some that sometimes are within our control too. This is a great way to prepare proactively, and even as costs continue to rise, housing costs continue to rise, sometimes we have to invest in the necessary infrastructure that we have. And there are other ways that we can invest in some of the programming that I was just talking about on energy efficiency as well that can bring down costs as well for people and help make housing and life here in Longmont and running a business here in Longmont affordable and efficient. So I will just cite my previous comments as well in saying, energy efficiency I know is not exactly what this rate increase is for, but it's investing in programs that hopefully will complement that. And I would encourage the council to continue to think about ways to invest in efficiency for all residents of all income levels, whether they rent or own property in Longmont. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. And he spoke on Resolution 2023-47. Ordinance. Seeing no one else in the public, close the public hearing. Can I have a motion for 2023-47?
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem moved 2023-47. Councilor Martin seconded that. Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I'm fully supportive of what we're about to vote on. I do think, especially given Matthew's comments, that it's worth just taking a moment to remember, and it may be that some of our staff over here could remind us of where our utility rates fall or end up, in terms of benchmarking against other municipalities. Where do we fall in terms of those benchmarks or comparisons to other municipalities in the Front Range?
Darryl?
Off the top of your head, I'm not trying to catch anybody on this. It's a reminder for folks, even with the investments, and maybe because of the investments we're making over time.
Mayor Peck, members of council, Dr. Waters, Councilmember Waters.
Again, I'm going to be a has-been here pretty soon, so call me anything you want.
From an electric perspective, I believe LPC is the third lowest among its peers, but I can't speak for some of the other utilities. How's that for a half answer?
You know what? That's enough.
Okay.
That's good enough.
Okay.
And the reason that I appreciate the information is that let me just frame it as a question. Is it likely that we are the third lowest in the Front Range because of the kinds of investments that we're talking about that you described tonight that'll be funded with this rate increase?
I believe the short answer would be yes. I think there's a lot that goes into it.
Absolutely. And that the resourcing required to do that work or the funding is shared across the entire community, all ratepayers, with a very few exceptions in terms of those who receive some kind of subsidy from our subsidy program.
That's right. Our rates are intended to be cost of service based. So
who benefits as a result of that work?
All of the customers.
Every user of electricity in the city of Longmont.
That's right.
Residents?
Well, not only the LPC customers, but as you say, folks who work here, folks who live here, businesses.
Large businesses?
Large, small
businesses.
Medium.
Main Street businesses. So our business community, as they also contribute, they benefit because everyone else helps to share in the cost of providing the infrastructure, the transmission, the actual cost of electricity to make this the kind of community it is, vibrant and affordable and reliable. Is that true?
I will not disagree.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor Peck.
Okay, let's vote. That carries unanimously. The second ordinance would be 2023-48, a bill for an ordinance amending 4.08.040 of the Longmont Municipal Code on city rebate programs for income qualified residents. This would actually go back to our electric rates, this ordinance. So are there any questions from council on this? Seeing none, I would like to open the public hearing on 2023-48. This time I'm definitely looking for hands. No, Matthew's gone. Well, he's gone from this ordinance. Thank you. Seeing no one in the public that wants to address this ordinance, I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I have a vote?
I move ordinance B0-2023-48.
Okay, that's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. All those, well, let's just vote. I forgot we have this. Man. That passes unanimously. Thank you. The next one, C0-2023-49, is a bill for an ordinance amending the boundaries of the Longmont Downtown Development Authority area by amending ordinance number 0-2022-11. Are there any questions from council on this? Seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing on 2023-49. Seeing no one, I am going to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion?
I move ordinance 2023-49.
Second.
So, it was moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. That carries unanimously. D is for 0-2023-52. It's a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2023. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing on 2023-52. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak to this ordinance? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing on 2023-52. Can I have a vote? It was moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. E is 2023-53, a bill for an ordinance extending the period during which the Longmont Downtown Development Authority may allocate and collect in the Downtown Development Authority Tax Increment Fund a portion of property taxes. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing on 2023-53. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak to this ordinance? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. May I have a vote? A motion?
Ordinance 2023-53.
So it was moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Martin. No, I'm sorry, Waters. Let's vote. That carries unanimously. I didn't get that. F is a 2024 budget ordinances. F1 is 2023-54, a bill for an ordinance fixing and levying taxes upon the real and personal property within the City of Longmont for the year 2023 to pay budgeted city expenses for the 2024 fiscal year. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing on 2023-54. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion on 2023-54.
I'll move ordinance 2023-54.
Thank you. That was moved by Councilor Susie Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. F2 is 2023-55, a bill for an ordinance fixing and levying taxes upon the real and personal property within the Longmont Downtown Development District for the year 2023 to pay budgeted expenses of the Longmont Downtown Development Authority for the year 2024 fiscal year. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing for 2023-55. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing on 2023-55 and ask for a motion. So, Councilor McCoy moved 2023-55, seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. F3 is 2023-56, a bill for an ordinance adopting the budget for the city of Longmont for the year 2024. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance or this bill? Seeing no one, I will open the public hearing on 2023-56. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing, and can I have a motion?
I move 0-2023-56.
I'll second that. This was moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Mayor Peck. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. F4 is 2023-57. It's a bill for an ordinance making appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2024. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing on 2023-57. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address this? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I move O 2023-57.
That was moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Waters. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. G is 2023-58. It's a bill for an ordinance repealing and reenacting Chapter 15.02.110 of the Longmont Municipal Code on public and common private improvement review, construction, and acceptance. Do we have any questions from council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I will open up the public hearing for ordinance 2023-58. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address this ordinance? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion.
I move 0-2023-58.
Second.
That was moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously, and that is the end of items on ordinances on second hearing. Now we are going to move back to the items removed from the consent agenda. Can we do 9B? We have a presentation on that. I personally want to go to 9B if you don't mind. Thank you.
Mayor, members of council, Molly O'Donnell, Housing Director for the city. I am here to briefly speak about some options that we'd like you to consider when you are looking at the inclusionary housing ordinance that is on tonight's agenda for consideration. So we have presented on this a number of times. We first presented what the results of the root policy analysis study on our inclusionary housing program looked like. this. This is enough. Let's do this. Is that good? Okay, there we go. Just. So we presented the results of that analysis back in July, and then have made the updates to the program that you'll be seeing here tonight for first reading. Since that time, just going over a little bit of history, we have sent out notices to all of the development, the developers in the development review pipeline that have pending projects to let them know that this is coming up for consideration by council. We did that in August. And if the ordinance was going to move forward on the typical timeline, then it would be effective 10 days after second reading, which would be November 27th of this year. I want to present a couple of options for council to consider in terms of the implementation of these changes. And depending on what you would like to see, we could make changes to the ordinance and or the code that we brought back for second reading on November 14th. So now we're going to back up in time a little bit more. The history of implementation of IH, in a very brief manner, I promise. It became effective in December 2018, and code said that at that time, within 10 days, or at 10 days after the second reading of that ordinance in December, all projects with final plat, site plan, PUD, and a couple of other types of projects, it would be in effect at that time. If you have not yet received those approvals, that is when it would be in effect. The code also says that staff would bring back a recalculation according to the approved methodology every 3 years, present it to council, but it would be effective immediately. So that was due to be done in December 2021. Of course, at that time we had COVID, we had the entire housing team turned over, and then we also were awarded the housing planning grant to get our housing needs assessment and this inclusionary housing policy review completed. So we really did want to feed that in and make sure that we were incorporating whatever that recommended. So that's why it's not happening at the 3-year mark. We're here closer to the 5-year mark when we completed all of that. So I just want to let you know what is currently in code about how this should be implemented, and let you know that we have received feedback from developers asking for some flexibilities. So there are 2 questions up for you tonight that we could modify as needed in the second reading. So the first is we would leave this is the short-term question, just the ordinance itself, when we would put the ordinance into effect. The traditional timeline would be November 27th. We could align with the fee manual that is published annually on January 2nd, and then all of the fees are published in one place at one time, or another date suitable to council. So again, this is just for the effective date of this ordinance. The second question I'm going to show you in a moment, just in case you want to consider them together, is should we make changes to the code to have an expected process ongoing in the future for future updates? Would you like to see the second question first?
So, council, do you want to move on? Okay, go ahead.
So here's what staff has recommended as something that council could consider. Would you want to modify the code to set an ongoing implementation timeline to provide more clarity and predictability to when this change occurs? An example would be that staff analyzes the fee in lieu update calculation in the second quarter of every 3rd year, so we're still on a 3-year cycle. That the second quarter would take into account the data from that prior year. It would just take that time to get all the data in-house and calculated. And then staff could present the fee in lieu update to council by mid-year that same year, and then it could be effective January 2nd of the next year and published with the fee manual. That does result in a bit of a delay in implementation, but it would give a lot of predictability and time for developers to plan for it. So for example, what this would mean is that we would, in second quarter of 2026, we would analyze the next update calculation using primarily 2025 data, bring that to council in July 2026, and it would go into effect January 2027. just an option for consideration, or anything else that council would like to see, if anything, on this side.
Counselor Martin.
Thank you very much, Mayor Peck. I have two questions. The first one is why every third year? And because I thought it was originally every second year. I could be remembering this wrong, but
It is
it
written
was
as
every
code as third year.
Because we have a huge step now, right? It's 500% or something. Is that because it was we only missed 1.5 cycles?
That is a combination of the 1.5 cycles and also the new tweak to the methodology to use new construction numbers as the baseline.
Okay.
So it's a combination this year only.
Right. Okay. Well, so I still have my doubts because based on, a lifetime of experience, I'm expecting continued volatility in the housing market and materials costs and other stuff. So I wonder if we should not consider rethinking this every 2 years so that it's not such a shock when it happens. And my other suggestion is that we should do something about this year because, this adjustment, maybe phase it in, not only delay the implementation date, but do a partial raise on the first implementation date and then 6 months later make it longer, make it catch up the rest of the way, or something like that. I sort of thought, I sort of expected to see something like that in the first reading because several of the developers that wanted to meet with us had suggestions like that. I thought that was a good suggestion and I didn't see any reason not to do it. So I was surprised not to see a stair step of some sort in what was before us in this packet.
So that would require a code change to do that. And so, correct him? Yeah. So that's why we didn't propose it off immediately, but we did want to ask that question of you if you wanted to see a code change to make something like that happen.
Okay, well, personally, I think I do, and since we're probably delaying implementation anyway, there's time to make a code change, because we're not trying to get this done in 10 days. So everyone would be happy. So that's just my feedback on this.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Could you remind me, so you said that applications that were within a certain level, such as final plat, and what were all of those?
So when the original ordinance took effect, it was all applications that didn't yet have a final plat approved, site plan approved, PUD plan approved, and then certain other development agreement.
So final plat, site plan, PUD. Okay. And I see the counselor.
Councilman Rodriguez, Tim Hall, Assistant City Attorney. I'll just read the language straight from the code. This section shall apply only to any development receiving approval of final plat, site plan, PUD plan, overall development plan, or other similar planning approval after December 11th, 2018. That being the date of the ordinance passage.
So in concept, when we're talking about this, those would also be anybody that's in the application process and falls within those levels, if you will, would be grandfathered?
Correct.
Okay.
If they have received approvals on those already.
Yeah, they're already in that level, right? Yeah. Okay.
The fee that you pay is the fee that is in effect at the final site plan, or final plat or site plan, whichever is later. And so if they have those, then they're paying the fee that's in effect at the time of that approval.
And how long can an application stay active if it's not graduated to that level yet?
Years.
I mean, is there a time limit on applications?
I don't have the code section right off the top of my head, but all applications do have a time in which we expect people to resubmit those. And I want to say that it's like we typically give people a year, and if they don't resubmit, we tell them we'll kick them out and they'll have to start over.
but we typically start sending warnings at 9 months, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, Glenn's giving me the thumbs up, so my memory's better than I
All
thought.
right. Right, and so setting some kind of arbitrary timeline, which has kind of been suggested by some folks that I've gotten emails from, versus staying within code, to me, is problematic. Because I could see a situation where, you know, maybe a bunch of people jump in just to avoid the change, if you will, the change in the FIL. So I'd rather stick within code as far as 10 days after second reading. And if you fall within, well, as has just been enumerated, the different levels of the application process, which you are grandfathered for, I think that's sufficient, in my opinion. If you haven't gotten to that point yet, I mean, that's just kind of how this process works, especially because it's been codified already. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel here, if you will. And moving on to the other question about every third year and July 31st and all that. I believe if we can get back to a more regularized schedule, timely schedule, that will definitely help with, you know, the concept of clarity and predictability. So that's where kind of my thinking is centered on this subject, and happy to hear other council members. Thank you, staff, for your answers.
Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Just building on Mayor Pro Tem's comments, I do think creating a system where it's baked into a calendar, so everybody can put it in their, you know, in their tickler file, to remember that on this date in this year, this process starts, and on this date it ends, and you take that uncertainty out of it. I've raised the question in other meetings, I don't know how long ago, about, you know, when are we going to review the fee in lieu, because we hadn't done it. And I'm certain it's frustrating for folks who are in the business to have maybe been anticipating that, and then it doesn't happen, and then now it does happen, and, you know, they're caught in some, you know, stage of the process. So to your second question, personally, I think it's smart to do this. Who knows what kind of pandemic we'll have, or turnover in staff, or other issues, you know, that are going to surface when the time comes when this might have happened if it's not regulated this way, right? Just like it did in 2021. So when we get to a vote, I'm going to support, I don't know when the time is to make motions, but I think what you're offering here makes a lot of sense in terms of question number 2. And on question number 1, I think what we did with the inclusionary housing ordinance to say if you're at this point in the development process or not yet there, right, that's the key in terms of whether or not the fee applies, makes as much sense now as it did then. And I don't know which projects are going to get caught up in this, and we've all heard from various folks, and I'm not going to try to, you know, put some value judgment on one project versus another. I think if you're not at the platting, at final plat, site approval, you know, then whatever the new rate's going to be applies, personally. I just want to amplify what we heard Wendell Pickett say tonight, that the fee ought to go up, right? We've heard, I'm certain other council members have heard over the last couple of years, that had we been more aggressive, or had we set a higher payment in lieu back in 2018, we probably would have more affordable housing, right? It was too easy. And I know developers would say, are you nuts? None of that's easy. It's a lot of money. But it was an option that was more easily made than building, you know, the housing stock. So I don't know if the numbers we're looking at, right, what the increases are going to get us there, but I think it's the right move. But I do think we need to create exceptions for folks who have crossed a threshold, not the finish line, but a threshold in terms of platting, final site, you know, the criteria that currently exists in the code. But I do like number 2 when the time comes to make motions.
So I think we should stay with code, and I think the implementation date should be January of '24, which gives people who are not at that stage in the code that many more months to know that they need to move if they want to move their project further. But if we go outside of that code, some of those projects are 3, 4, 5 years old, which means they would never get their fee in lieu raised if we don't set timelines. And I like number 2. I like what you're doing here. It makes sense. But I do want to say in 2018, Councilor Waters, you're right, we should have had a higher fee in lieu. But that was a pretty big pill. The IZO was a big pill for developers to swallow at that point. So I think we eased them into it. So are there any other comments? So do you want to make the motion, Councilor or Mayor Pro Tem? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll make a motion, we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So I think probably should take these in 2 motions. First motion, and so I know that the mayor has just disagreed in that concept, but my first motion is that the fee in lieu increase takes effect 10 days after second reading, which I believe is November 27th, based on the slide that I saw, and with current code being the demarcation point as far as site plan, final PUD or PUD, final plat, the as specified by council. And so that's the first motion.
Gotta get back to my screen. Come on, you can do it. I would love to vote for this, but I think in November is too soon. I would like to give developers a little more headway for it to be January, that it's the implementation is. But let's vote. Okay, you've got it. Oh. So that passes 6-1 with Councilor Martin in opposition.
And then, since I still have the floor, as far as question number 2, I move that we go with staff recommendations as enumerated on the screen about regularizing the process every 3rd year. What else do I need? Does it, yeah, July 30, sorry, there we go. And of course it just changed.
Sorry.
Yeah, staff analyzes the FIL update calculation in the 2nd quarter of every 3rd year, presents the FIL update to council by July 31st, and make that effective January 2nd of the next year.
That's been made by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Waters. Discussion, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Yeah, I just want some clarification because it sounded like the first motion said, let's stay with code, and then this second option says modify code. How do we reconcile those two things?
So for the first motion, it would be the ordinance, the effective date of the ordinance is what the November 27th date would be. And then the references to code are more about maintaining the thresholds for if you have reached this point in the process, keeping that as is in code. And then the second one is just to modify implementation pieces in the code to make it the dates for the next round of updates.
Okay,
consistent.
so I still have questions, which is that if does that mean that there's going to be a modification in the future to implement this every 3rd year anticipatory policy? So because otherwise the implementation date would change based on when you bring back the code change.
So, are you going thank you.
Mayor, members of council, this is an ordinance that's presently before you, so this is first reading on an ordinance. You could make an amendment to the ordinance that's presently before you to go into the second reading. So that code change could take effect with this ordinance.
Okay, so you are suggesting that this motion, the motion that's before us now, is an amendment to what has been moved?
That is correct. We would put an amendment to the second reading
Okay,
of this ordinance.
thank you.
So let's vote. That passes unanimously. So, we need to move then ordinance 2023-60 as amended? Or with, how does that work?
My preference would be that you gave direction for us to bring back an amendment for you to view on a second reading, so you can see
Okay.
the direct language.
Yeah. So I move that we give direction to staff to bring back 2023-60 with the recommendations that we give. So I made that motion, seconded by Councilor McCoy. Let's vote. I see questions on your faces. Is this correct?
My understanding is the previous vote was direction to bring it back an amendment.
Oh, so we've
we
already
need-
done that?
And we
Okay.
need a motion, we need a vote on the ordinance itself, the first
You need
reading.
to approve the ordinance. The first motion was the direction. You need to approve the ordinance to move it forward to second reading.
With the amendments?
Yes.
Thank you. So I will reiterate that motion. I move that we move 2023-60 to second reading with the amendments. Is that correct? Okay. So, once again, I'm sorry, we only have only three people voted. We did, only partially. So that motion, the amended motion passed. Thank you. Thank you, Molly. So another ordinance that was pulled was A, and Counselor Waters pulled that.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. When Wendell commented, I wouldn't have pulled this off until Wendell made a comment about, address this and increase costs. I thought we were fee waiving here, not increasing costs. Was that just a misstatement or a misunderstanding, or where would be the additional costs in what we're doing with ordinance 2023-59?
There should not be additional costs. That is fee waiving.
Yeah.
But if the comment was made regarding both the inclusionary housing and the attainable housing fee waiver, that the additional cost would certainly be related to the fee in lieu, if that
All
was
right, I
how
just
I'm
wanted to make
understanding
clear I
his
hadn't
comment.
missed something. It's like we've
No,
gone
no,
through
no.
this pretty extensively, and it's like, whoa, there was no cost that I was anticipating.
Right.
With that, I'm going to move approval of ordinance 2023-59.
It's been moved by Counselor Waters, seconded by Counselor Martin. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. The next one pulled was J, and that's Counselor Waters also.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. That's the resolution. I'm happy that this came back, but, in this timeframe. The reason I pulled it off the agenda only is to ask the question of staff. This, who knows, when the expansion of the museum's completed, I'm not certain what that timeline is, and maybe, and since they're so fundraising, I don't know who would have a handle on what the anticipated timeline is. But it's when we've done the expansion that this resolution specifically addresses the need for additional staff because of, the expanded amenity and all that's going to be done with it. Here's a worst fear. I talk about worst fears and best hopes for the last 6 years, for the last 50 years. My worst fear here would be that this gets forgotten, right? It comes back and later somebody says, did a council do something with that or not? And we just kind of move on. How would we ensure I think of a couple of ways we could do this to make certain this is in front of a council when that time comes. But what are your thoughts about how to do that? I see Jeff moved over behind you, and he's grinning, so he must have an answer, so.
Mayor, members of council, Jeff Friesner, Director of Recreation and Culture. And I'll apologize, Eric was not able to come tonight. He had a family emergency right before council started. But being the director of our department, I will make sure that this resolution is on my wall, and when we're ready, we'll be able to pull it up. We estimate that construction could be done sometime in 2026.
So if it's finished in '26, it would actually be in '26 that where you'd be doing the staffing.
Yep.
So I don't think it would be out of line, would it, to give direction to staff? Now, this is down the line. The first budget presentation of every year now is the first meeting in May. Wouldn't be inappropriate, would it, to give direction to staff? I guess I'm looking at other council members, that on that presentation, May of 2025, that be part of the presentation, right? And we give that direction tonight, so whoever sits on a council in May of 2025 is reminded, as that budget is presented, that this resolution was adopted, assuming it's going to pass by this council.
You can't retire, Jeff, until this is done.
Right. I mean, tell me if that, I mean, I understand that's a little unusual, but it would potentially take some of the burden off you, put it all on Harold and Jim in terms of the budget presentation. But, any comment?
We certainly could do that, and as long as that's okay with Harold.
It's fine.
I'm gonna, then Mayor Peck, I'm gonna do can I do two motions? I'm gonna move approval of ordinance 2023-88.
2388 was moved by Counselor Waters, seconded by Counselor
Did all go Faring?
Yarbrough.
She beat me to it.
Oh,
Susan Yarbrough, we'll do that one. Let's vote.
can I offer a second motion?
That carries unanimously. Counselor Waters, perhaps it should probably be with Becky Doyle as well, I mean, in the budget process.
That's Jim and Teresa's group.
Yeah.
Jim and Teresa's group, okay.
Here's my concern. We heard tonight, a few minutes ago, we were dealing with an ordinance and an adjustment to a payment in lieu that in 2018, we said we were going to adjust in 2021, and we didn't. For reasons that are understandable. I'm not blaming anybody.
I understand
But
what
it's
you're
real
doing.
easy for that to happen again.
I understand.
I'd just like to try to get in front of it and raise the stakes or raise, the concerns that it doesn't happen on this one.
Okay. Yes,
So,
go ahead.
I'd like to move that we give direction to staff that part of the budget presentation in May of 2025 include this resolution as a reminder to whoever sits on council at that time.
Second.
Thank you. This motion was moved by Counselor Waters, seconded by Counselor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And I should read this. It's a resolution of the Longmont City Council encouraging Longmont Museum to be funded at a level communities with, no, that's not what this is. This is a.
That's it.
But this one was the motion for 2025.
Right. We passed the ordinance. This was to attach the ordinance, present the resolution.
Okay, I got it. You're right. Okay, at a level comparable with other facilities in other municipalities. And that passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is the end of what was pulled off of first reading.
I move we recess as the Longmont City Council convene as the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1.
Second.
So we are recessing as the Longmont City Council and reconvening as the directors of the Longmont General Improvement District, and that was made by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's vote. Passes unanimously. The Longmont General Improvement District 2024 Budget Resolutions. A1, RLGID 2023-03. A resolution fixing and levying taxes on the real and personal property within the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1 for the year 2023 to pay budgeted expenses of the district for the 2024 fiscal year. Do any councilor members have questions on this? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion on this resolution.
I move RLGID 2023-03.
Right, it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Waters. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. A2, RLGID 2023-04, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Longmont General Improvement District Number 1, adopting the annual budget for the district for the fiscal year 2024. Are there any council members that have questions? Seeing none, I ask for a motion. I'll second that. It's been moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Mayor Peck. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously.
I move we adjourn as the Board of Directors of Longmont General Improvement District Number 1 and reconvene as the Longmont City Council.
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Ferry. Let's vote. By everyone. Now we have an ordinance B, which is 2023-61. It's a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 3 of the Longmont Municipal Code on Personnel Rules. Second reading and public hearing on this ordinance will be on November 14th, 2023. Council members have any questions on this? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion on. No? Oh, you do have a presentation? Great.
If you don't have any questions.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Joanne Zias from Human Resources. I promise I'll make this quick given the time. Wanted to point out a number of important pieces in the personnel rule changes. We're not going to go through every single line that we changed. Did want to just let you guys know that the reason that we made the changes were because we haven't done a comprehensive personnel rules change for quite some time. It looks like it's been about 10 years. We have brought pieces of the personnel rules back as we've needed to make individual changes, but we haven't gone through and made a comprehensive change, and that's why you're seeing so many of the wording changes that you'll see throughout the document. We have three categories of changes that we've made within the documents. The first is rules and practice updates. So two examples of that. One of them is in job vacancies. We needed to make some changes to allow some flexibility in the selection process. This policy's always had a rider that said that we could make changes, but we really wanted to be a little bit more explicit about it so that we were able to show that we were complying with the federal and the state regulations. We needed a little bit more speed and efficiency in our process, and so that language was just to be able to speed that up, to be able to make those changes along the way. And so what we do is, in addition to open competitive, which is our standard, we also have an internal selection process, and we also have a promotional notification process so that we're not going through a selection process for a position that we've already budgeted and we already have somebody in that position. Injuries on the job is another area where we just have law and code change, or law changes, and we need to make sure that we're matching our policy to what the state law is. And we also wanted, in this case, to separate out accidents from injuries, because with injuries, we need to make sure we're following the state law, giving a little additional time as necessary, whereas with accidents, we want to make sure we're on top of that immediately, and we're following up so that we can have a clear investigation. So those are two examples of where we have just law changes or process changes that we need to move forward with. The second piece we have is some policy changes, And you've seen this in the past because we did go through a lot of this with the pay plan. We had Mercer come in and do a pay and a compensation study. So the sections that you're seeing in the pay plan and the establishment and review is what we did approve through the budget process, and now we're just establishing that and adjusting it in code. The next piece that is in that change, process change, is family and medical leave. Two major changes. One is to simplify the language because we're bound by federal legislation in this case. So to actually parrot the federal legislation kind of leaves us bound. And if the policy changes, we're stuck with something that doesn't match and we have to follow federal policy anyway. The other change that you'll see in here is that we are trying to match FMLA with concurrent use of time off. What we were doing in personnel policies in the past or in our current version is having people use sick and vacation time and then apply for family and medical leave. We'd like to adjust this to make it concurrent use of FMLA. That's pretty much the standard practice in most organizations, and we do follow market. And in addition to that, we have additional benefits that we're recommending. And so to be able to get to balance that and still meet the needs for the organization when we have staffing needs, we wanted to make sure that we had this flexibility. The third piece is the benefit change requests. And these are all coming as a result of the Mercer study and as a result of our market review, and also from employees that are asking for these benefits. So we had a couple of reasons that we made these recommendations. The first is vacation leave. We found that we were mostly competitive with vacation leave, but with 16 or more years, we were lagging a little bit behind. So the first thing that you will see is the addition of 1 day of vacation for 16+ year employees. The second piece is a provision to allow past experience to qualify for a higher accrual. So what this looks like is employees that are coming in with sufficient or really high level of experience, we want to be able to bring them over without having them start over as new employees. We would also extend that to our existing employees to do a catch-up if people were coming in for that level of experience and did not get that opportunity. And then the third is 40 hours of vacation time to be provided upon hire. We currently have an accrual system and people need to be able to build up to that 40 hours. We're seeing in the market that a lot of our competitors are bringing people in with 40 hours and it's kind of giving us some challenges, so we want to be able to adjust that as well. And then the last thing is parental and caregiver leave. This is a benefit that we've been asked about for multiple years, and then when we did the Mercer study, we found that it is pretty prevalent in the market, as well as our employees requesting this. And so what we're asking for is a new benefit, a provision of 6 weeks for the reasons that you'll see on your screen, so the birth of a child, placement of a child, care for individuals in an immediate parental role, or care for a terminally ill spouse or child. So this really meets what the market need is. It also exceeds it a little bit because we're seeing in some of our workforce those last two pieces are just really critical and we want to be able to retain employees. We did set a benefit limitation throughout the lifetime, so that's really the way that we're going to be able to address, so we don't have continual use of it. So we would ask employees to use it up to 3 times, no more than 3 times, and that kind of mirrors what we're doing with our injury leave right now for outside of work. And then we also have a provision that if there's catastrophic leave needs, that the city manager could approve that type of leave as necessary.
I do want to highlight one, so when Joanne indicated, so the care for individuals in an immediate parental role, so somebody who, in my case, would be my mom, or because I was raised by her and my aunt would qualify, or the spouse. That's different than what we're typically seeing in some of the other policies. And part of our discussion was what we're seeing in our organization right now is that we have people dealing with parental and caregiver. We have parental on one side where people are having children, and on the other side there's a considerable amount of our staff that are dealing with older parents and older family members, and so we really wanted to balance that out for both ends of the spectrum. So we've been talking a lot about market. This is where we're pushing a little beyond what the market is so we can have a more holistic viewpoint within our organization.
And just a little bit of a catch for the additional changes that we have that I didn't highlight in one of those sections. You will see a lot of definitions incorporated throughout the personnel policy changes. We wanted to make sure we got up to date on things like part-time non-benefited employees, which was discussed with council a couple of years ago to differentiate it from temporary employees. We didn't want someone that had been here 10 years to be called a temporary employee. Pay advancement, we adjusted that for new review periods, updated some definitions for overtime and on-call to be able to adjust by discretion of the city manager. We also added a little bit in administrative leave for the same reason, special circumstances. We want to make sure the city manager has the ability to make those adjustments or those leaves. And then election to municipal office, we wanted to make sure we could clarify that employees may also participate in boards and commissions if there's not a conflict with their primary job responsibility. So here for any questions you might have.
It looks like we have quite a few.
Great.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I understand this comes before us because it lives within the.
Oh, I didn't mean to turn you off. Come on, come on, come on. It's not allowing me. There we go.
All right, thank you, Mayor Peck. I know this lives within the code, and so it has to come before us, but to me, this really inherently is operational, which is more under the purview of the city manager, and if we did not approve of the city manager's philosophy of operations, I don't think we would retain him, much less give him, you know, the requisite pay that we've also decided upon as a council. And so, to me, I guess not to really even paraphrase, but to quote Councilmember Waters, you know, never mind.
You can't quote him.
No, I don't want to steal his wind, but I will move ordinance 2023-61.
Okay, that 2023-61, it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Councilor Martin. Let's have discussion. Who is he to? Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I just had a question. Can you go back to the slide before this one? No, not, yeah. So how many, I know you said it, I probably wasn't, obviously I wasn't listening. You said that an employee can only use this benefit 3 times. Is it 3 times throughout their time of employment, or is that annual? I mean, because what if somebody has 4 kids and need the 6 weeks every time they have a child and have a mother or a parent they have to take care of? So I was just wanting to confirm that, clarify.
So Councilmember Yarborough, the way that we currently have it drafted in the personnel regs is that we are going to create an administrative regulation to be able to move forward with the details of the program.
Okay.
The way that I currently have it drafted is 3 within a lifetime, because as somebody is with us for a period of time, they will continue to accrue time. So the hope is that you could balance that. I don't know that 3 is the magic number, but I do know that we would need some sort of a regulation on it, because we have some categories that really could happen very frequently. So, for example, we have foster care put into the policy. And so if somebody had 6 or 7 foster care placements in a year, we wouldn't necessarily want them to be out for the whole year.
Right.
And so we need some sort of a limit. I don't know that
I
3 is
agree.
the magic number, but that's how I currently have it drafted, and we have not yet passed that in administrative reg.
Okay. I guess we can encourage people to have twins and then they get it done and over with. But no, I just wanted to make sure. I know it says lifetime, but I was just making sure because, you know, all of that can happen at one time, you know,
Yeah.
within 1 year. So, all right, thank you.
Yeah, part of it's our administrative reg process. Basically, she drafts it, she puts it out, we go over it with the employee advisory group, who makes some recommendations, and then it goes to the directors group, and then we put it out to the entire organization for them to comment. Then we take feedback, and then based on the feedback, then I adopt the administrative regulation. So I'm sure those are things that we will see and deal with in that process. I do agree with Joanne in that we have a similar provision in our leave share program. And I think what we don't want is we don't want it open-ended where we get into an issue where you have it a lot. And so, I think striking the balance in that based on the input we get from the organization is going to be important.
Yep. And it may be that, it starts in one direction and then needs to adjust as it goes.
And the other thing is I also have the ability for catastrophic leave. And so that inherently could give us some flexibility based on the circumstances that somebody's dealing with and helping to manage that too.
Like the fifth child.
Could be.
Triplets.
Well, and I think the other thing too is people are still accruing sick time and vacation. And so to a certain extent, now you also have that as you have a longer career within the organization. So it's really looking at the totality of everything that we have in the leave category.
Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Beck. You may have answered I have three questions. You may have answered one of them. It was about sick leave banking. You said borrowed leave. Do we have a sick leave bank program that folks who are out of sick leave can draw from?
Yes.
Employees can donate
Yes.
sick leave, accrued sick leave to it, and that's, you were talking about some of the limits
Yep.
that apply to that. So number one. Number two, the 40 hours for people with rich or deep experience coming into the organization, the 40 hours would be 40 hours of sick leave awarded on the day of employment?
So there are two different provisions. One would be 40 hours and that would actually be across the board for anyone coming into the organization. And that is.
Any new employee?
Any new employee.
So let's stay with that just for a second. New employee needs to use that sick leave in their first 6 months of employment. When do they start then accruing additional sick leave? Is it at the end of the first month? Or you have 40 hours and you then start accruing and building on that 40 hours?
So let's back up a little bit. The 40 hours that we're adding is actually vacation.
Vacation.
Vacation, and that is what we're seeing from a market standpoint.
That's what John said it is.
Yeah, from a market standpoint, people are starting everyone out.
I get it.
So that's there. You start accruing sick leave immediately on your first pay period, and so you're starting to accrue that. I think to your question is what happens if you're in your first 4 months and you don't have enough accumulated to deal with the issue. That's then when we would go to the bank and ask for sick leave donations and working through that process.
Correct.
And is the assumption on the slide that we have right now, as a new benefit, these are paid or unpaid, or does it depend? They're all paid.
Yes.
So in addition to what I've accrued as sick leave and as vacation time, this is time on top of that for these reasons. Boom, 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 boom.
Yes.
Yeah, example, so I have.
Because I have the fifth child.
Or I have an older parent, so I start with the organization and then something happens where there's an issue and I need to deal with it. You could then go into this program and have this program support you during that period. This is a pretty significant addition to our leave package.
Yeah, I'd say so. All right, thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, let's vote.
I do want to
Okay.
remind council on one thing. One of the things that you did tell us as a policy directive at the beginning of this process was that whatever we did for new and incoming staff, that we need to do the same thing for existing staff.
Correct.
And so when we talk about the starting of the vacation at 40 hours that you start with, the plan is to also give existing staff 40 hours to match that and what we're bringing new staff on based on the policy direction. And then we're working through a process, and that's Sandy's and my direct report team's mission while I'm out for a little bit is to have that solidified, where we can also review individuals that came in with experience that didn't necessarily have the same ability to get it commensurate with experience. And those are all administrative regulations, but what I wanted you all to know is that's where we're taking your policy directive in terms of if you're doing it for the new folks, you need to do it. The other policy directive that you gave us was that it's across the board for the entire organization on all of these. And so we're taking that approach as well.
Thank you. Councilor Martin.
Yeah, so this is expensive. Is this already in the personnel budget? Because it's was kind of hard to tell from the budget, not knowing what this was going to be.
So I think what we would say about this, so we've talked about this in terms of the 40 hours, Joanne, Sandy, help me with this. That has to be utilized in the.
I think we said in the first year.
In the first year, so that.
And both that vacation as well as the 6 weeks, or in this case, the 18 weeks over a lifetime, would not be paid out upon resignation from the city. So unlike sick leave and vacation time, that is paid out at the end of someone's tenure with the city, these benefits would not be.
Including the new vacation?
Well,
We have the new vacation as must be used in the first year, right?
Yeah, we were looking to incorporate it similar to when we had COVID, we needed to provide 2 days for everyone under a leave provision. And so we didn't put it in the vacation that was the accrued vacation. We put it in a separate category similar to personal leave so that they could utilize it, but that it would not be paid out if they left.
So Councilmember Martin, you're correct in the idea that, so when I had my kiddo, I used my sick leave, after his birth. In this particular case, people now would be able to take 6 weeks without using their sick leave or vacation. So that would have left me with more sick leave that would need to be paid out upon leaving. So in that way, there's a little more money that goes out towards that. But these particular benefits won't get paid out at somebody leaving. And so the budget impact is more minimal than I think it may look like.
So it's, we're paying for it with a reduction in organizational capacity rather than with a reduction in cash, with negative cash flow.
That's right. And most of these things need to be approved with supervisors, and we need to determine operational impacts as we go. We'll find out more, obviously, as we move through things. But yes, that it's more operational than it is hard dollars, although I see Jim
Okay,
coming down
and
too.
have you made any provision, and to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, this is probably operations, but I'm gonna ask anyway, have you made any provision to measure the impact on the organizational capacity of being so much more generous with leave?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about it, and let me back up, there are caps in terms of sick leave that we pay out and vacation. So your max vacation is 208 that we would actually pay out. So, and then the sick leave, Jim, I forgot it again, 480. So it's not like you can continue just accruing vacation and sick leave. So the caps that we have on what you can accrue are still going to be there. So that's one piece of the puzzle in terms of the cost upon separation.
Yeah, I'm not talking about separation, I'm talking about the work that's getting done.
Yeah, I'm going back to the first question in terms of the cost. When we look at it and say, there's a cost to this, I wanted to completely answer that question. The caps in terms of what we will pay back upon separation are not changing. So we're just allowing people to accrue it at a different level and have the time.
So it's there when you need it.
Right, but at the end of the day, the caps aren't changing. The second piece in terms of productivity, that is, yes, we need to watch it by operation, and there's a component within our vacation anyway. So at any point when somebody wants to take vacation, it's not like Sandy can come to me and say, I'm going to be off at these days. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I have discretion as a supervisor to say, here's what we're working on, here's what we're not doing, or here's what we need to do. I can approve it. So that's the first catch where the supervisors have to manage their operations on an ongoing basis. That is a management responsibility to really understand what is the impact of this, how are they approving their vacation, how are they approving how many people take vacation at any one time, and what does that mean to the ultimate workload. That is my responsibility to manage that to my direct reports. That's their responsibility to manage, and then that's their responsibility to manage, so we don't get to a point where we catch it after the fact.
And just to add to that, one of the things that we did see in 2020, 2021, and 2022, the beginning of it was our turnover had increased substantially. And one of the reasons we were seeing is going to other locations, which we were not getting before. So as those benefits are added in other locations, there's a trade-off in efficiency even if we did not do this.
Yeah, I'm not actually questioning the necessity of it. I'm just questioning whether we really have our arms around what the impact is going to be.
I think the other thing on the impact that I would be remiss in not talking about, I think the biggest challenge I have is that people don't take vacation. And you all have obviously talked to me about that. So it's hard for me to say. But I think the reality is what we're finding when I look across the organization is more people are delaying or not taking it in order to deal with the issues in front of them. And we're actually having a different conversation of really making sure that people take it. Just like you all had with me in terms of making sure I'm taking vacation. I think that's what we need to do as managers too, is to really work those issues.
Fair enough, thanks.
Real quick, thanks, Mayor Peck. My question is really about measurement, not about capacity and lost capacity when people on vacation. But Joanne, you mentioned turnover. It's occurred to me more than once, what is our turnover rate and what does it look like department by department, and what is their, it's like, that's a line I'm not going to cross. That's really not a policy question unless we're dealing with this, right? Then it becomes closer. So how are you going to measure? I would assume the part of the purpose of this is to increase our success in recruitment and in retention, right? And maybe a third measure would be, and I'm not certain how you calculate the likelihood that people actually use their vacation, right? There's maybe less accrual of vacation at the end of a year. That might be a measure. How are you going to evaluate? How are you going to know? Is it going to be by reduction of time from posting to employment in terms of, on the front end, in terms of recruitment, or just reduction of turnover on the backside of it or on the back end of it? I mean, whatever the costs are, they're going to be significant enough, and the implications are significant enough. There ought to be an eye towards evaluation of effects. What is that eye, and how are you going to measure?
So a couple things that stand out, I think on the recruitment end, it's always going to be if somebody says no to a job offer, why are they saying no? And we've been seeing more frequently, they're saying no because there's another more attractive offer, or they're saying no. When I first got here, I actually told Harold nobody ever said no for vacation time. I take that back now because we did get that a lot in the past 3 or 4 years, and we just were not getting that before. People wanted the job. So that would be one thing, is that are we losing offers? Are we having offers not accepted for that reason? On the retention side, I would look at leaving for other jobs. If somebody's leaving for a promotional job, that makes sense. If somebody's leaving for a lateral job, then that to me is, well, why are they leaving for a lateral job? Is it a supervision issue? Is it a vet benefits issue? 9 times out of 10, when we're getting exit interviews back, it does tend to be a benefits issue.
Do you have baseline data on either of those measures?
Say that again?
Do you have baseline data on either of those measures?
We have national data.
I'm talking about in terms of the city of Longmont, how many times people decline the invitation to come to work for us because of vacation?
It's we have baseline data, but it's limited. So we have it.
But that would be one measure.
Yeah.
As well as people who are leaving for lateral positions.
Yes,
right?
and that we have.
I mean, those are two pretty basic measures, but it does require discipline, right? To ask the question, collect the data, build the data set. I don't know how else you would evaluate it, but I do think it's worth evaluating to know whether or not you're having the effects, given that's the benefit to the city, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to our residents, is that we recruit high quality people and we keep them, right?
Yeah.
The cost to the organization is minimal, right? As far as dollars and cents compared to that benefit, but you got to prove that there's a benefit, and the only way to do it is to measure.
So the short answer is they're building a dashboard right now to give us all of that information real time. So as the city manager down through the managers, we have access to that data to really see what's happening. And so I know that that dashboard, Sandy, do you want to talk about that dashboard?
Well, you gotta have baseline for it to be very useful.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that we do have all of that information on turnover. We do record why people are leaving. We do have that information on the turnover side. The recruitment piece is kind of new. That's kind of a new trend that we've
Right.
seen just in the last few years. So we will start tracking that in the way that in the way that
Yeah.
you're suggesting.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
All right, let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Joanne and Harold and Jim. Yeah. I wish I would have had benefits like that when I was working. So we're now at final call, public invited to be heard. There were two people that were on the first call, but they were from Denver. If you're still here, you can, it is Gregory Glade. Is Gregory here?
Good evening. Hello. I'll
You
try and
stayed
be
the
brief.
whole meeting. Thank you.
Gregory Glade. I'm a founder of MGL Partners in Denver, Colorado, 1936 West 33rd. We've been one of the most prolific developers of affordable housing in the state of Colorado over the last 17 years. We've developed about 900 million of affordable housing since our inception in 2005. In 2007, we started into public-private partnerships, and we actually entered into a public-private partnership with the Longmont Housing Authority to develop Chrisman One Apartments, which many of you may know. That was a terrific success, and we're lucky enough to partner with them again on Chrisman Two, which is under construction. So I'm speaking specifically on behalf of ordinance, I believe it's 2360, with regard to the inclusionary housing ordinance. Again, we have been direct beneficiaries, and I'm hugely supportive of that in general. The concern that I have is purely just the timing as to how that relates to projects in the queue. We have a project that we are developing on Nelson Road that we originally went under contract in 2020. The site was zoned. Our original equity partner, walked away in mid-2022, last year, when the financial crisis, at least on the capital market side, started to unravel. We brought in Rockefeller Group to go ahead and move forward with that. However, prior to that, we actually did get in touch with our current partner, the Longmont Housing Authority. Some of the members are in this room, and we were just not able to execute quickly enough, quite frankly. The concern I have over the ordinance as it's currently drafted, again, really just relates to timing. It's not the concept. I certainly understand the fee increase. We've benefited directly. But it's the threshold of where you are. We submitted in 2022 on a zoned site for a building permit. We are now 14 months later, and we will not make the timeline as it's currently construed. We'll be lucky to have our permit based on how things have gone by February. So that means we'll have a 300% increase in the fee in lieu. And again, a lot of that timeline is dictated by the city. I'm certainly not upset with the city. I just heard a long presentation about staffing. We certainly experienced that directly on Chrisman 2 apartments with our partner, the Longmont Housing Authority, but also significant time delays on the current project. So I would just encourage you to please review the terms by which that ordinance should become effective for projects that are in the queue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gregory. Caitlin Quander. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, Caitlin Quander. I'm an attorney at Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, 410 17th Street. I'm here this evening on behalf of MGL Partners, you just heard from Greg, and a Rockefeller Group. And I just circulated a copy of a letter that was previously sent by email, but so you can have a hard copy. As he described, we're really focused on two projects that are currently in the city process, both submitted back in August of 2022. And the request relates to the affordable housing fee in lieu that was discussed earlier this evening, really requesting an effective date of May 31st, 2024 to allow those projects that are pretty far along in the queue to finish that work. And I do want to really be clear, I really appreciate staff and the city management, kind of when this came up recently, we reached out and they were very willing to meet, talk about our concerns, think through options, hear our suggestions, and you actually heard some of those here tonight. And so we really appreciate their willingness to think through those. I do want to speak to one point that I heard earlier, Councilman Rodriguez, from you, kind of this concern of projects being able to kind of jump in to avoid the change. And I want to parse that and clarify. The site plan and the plat and the PUD, those kind of threshold triggers, they happen right at the end. And so when you're talking about that, as you heard, these are projects in the queue for a year, 18 months. So they are not, there wouldn't be an ability to kind of jump in and make a date. They really have, by that point, they've invested an awful lot of pre-development dollars to get to that point. The site plan, the plat, those are really detailed documents, and they have worked in tandem with your planning department and engineering department and public works for months and months to really refine those. And so that investment is being made, and the ask is really to just continue to play under the rules that they submitted under. Related to the delayed effective date, I want to just be clear that that is a common approach in other cities, and Longmont, like many others, are looking at their affordable housing fees, looking at increases. It is a major issue across our metro area. Other cities are looking at delayed effective dates to really soften that blow on projects in the queue that made certain assumptions when they submitted. Just as an example, Denver, after hearing from the development community, did two things. They delayed their effective date, and they also phased in their fee in lieu increase over a couple of years. We're not asking for that here. It's really focused on the effective date, but it is something they did. They also made a kind of complicated change, but it worked really well for projects, setting a date of if you'd submitted by a date and end by a date, you can be grandfathered in. So with that, we do ask that you take a look again as you look ahead towards second hearing or second reading, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Caitlin. Is there anybody else that would like to address council during final call public invited to be heard? Lance Whitaker.
Mayor and council. My name is Lance Whitaker, 1750 Collier Street. An important thing for Longmont is energy storage, and I think we should really look forward to energy storage and the opportunities of jobs in energy storage, because that inevitably will lead to more affordable housing if we have better jobs than just the Walmart jobs. Longmont set up for manufacturing, so manufacturing of solar parts and other parts considered with energy would probably be a good way to go, because inevitably housing is affordable only because we make more money. So that being said, that's all I have to really say today.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Seeing no one else, I'm going to close final call public invited to be heard, and we're going to move on to mayor and council comments. Is there anybody on council that would like to comment? Seeing none, we'll move it over to city manager remarks.
Comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney.
No comments, Mayor.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilor McCoy, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo. Faring, let's vote.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.